I took my Tylenol out and I never took it. So I'm going to have a vitaminute with my Tylenol.
I just did something really gross too.
Cool.
Cool. You just took your Tylenol. I just took Tums out of my mouth.
Ew, why? Oh, to start the podcast?
Yeah, because I was afraid people would hear them
That's
clacking
extremely
in my teeth.
professional of you.
Thank you, but now I'm holding wet chalk. And also my heart still hurts, but I guess, the show must go on. So I guess
Honestly,
I'll hold them for later.
Extremely professional.
Thank
cool.
you. I was like, lick the Tums backwash off my own fingers.
Okay, well now it's getting actually gross.
No, you're fine.
Hello.
How was your Tylenol? Are you taking it? Are you having fun?
No, I need to take it. I have such a roaring headache. I rarely ever
Do
get
you?
headaches. I feel very fortunate about that. So when I do, I'm like, why? Why are you doing this to my brain?
That's me with tummy aches, and I always feel bad
Yes.
complaining about tummy aches next to you because I know you just live in one constant tummy ache. But
I know when I talk to people with migraines, I'm like, you would not believe. And they're like, okay, shut up.
No, in the times, and it's always because I slept wrong. It's always because I slept wrong. And
Wait, your head or your tummy?
Oh, no. Sorry, I totally jumped into a different. A headache, a migraine.
I knew that, but I felt like the audience needed a
Thank
little
you.
filler to catch up, so I feigned ignorance.
Oh, thank God. Yeah.
I'm reading your mind today, if you haven't noticed.
No, anytime I have a migraine, I would say 99% of the time it's because I slept the wrong way, because I'm a very particular pillow person when it comes to
A triple P.
Yeah.
We all know one. We all love one.
Do you know how many? Just to test our friendship here, do you know how many pillows I need to sleep comfortably?
It's 6 or is it 4? 4.
It's 4.
Yeah, I was like, it's either 4 or 6. It's
Good
4.
call.
For me, I need 1 under my head and no more than 1. I know I'm a psychopath.
deranged.
I'm aware because like when I go to a hotel, I'm like all the pillows. Although I do hug 1, I guess, so that's 2. So I have 1 under my head, 1 hugging. But if I sleep with 2 pillows, headache central. I'm like, my neck's bent now.
Well, I only have 1 that I actually use for my head support, but I have a second one to hug. I got a third one. I got to do the leg hug, like because as I'm getting older, I think my hips are like collapsing within themselves.
Mine are too. It's bad.
It hurts so fucking much. If I don't sleep with a pillow between my legs, we got a problem.
Why are we so old?
I don't know, but now I've got a secret 4th one for my lower back because sometimes I'll wake up and that's in pain. So it's all pain preventative. So that's.
Yeah.
It's not because it's like fun to have 4 pillows and be such a diva about it, but anyway, fun fact about me today and fun fact about you.
Well, why do you drink today, Em?
Well, I drink water and Tums chalk because okay, here's why. Because I got back into my VR, which like I never got out of it. I have this weird thing. I don't know what the deal is, but to reward myself every night I say, you know what? If I get all my work done, I'm going to play VR tonight. And I never get to play VR. I just...
I feel like a psychotherapist would be sitting here going, you don't feel like you deserve it.
There's got to be something there, but I always end up not playing my VR and I always end up regretting it. And last night I was like, no, I'm going to actually play this thing and I'm going to have a good time. I'm going to treat myself. And I was looking through the new games and there's this new one. And... wow.
What is it?
The best time of my life. So it's called Bartender, and
what?
I'm a bartender in space.
No.
And
that's your dream job. As somebody who is so like
lovely.
Doesn't drink, that is your dream job, believe it or not, everybody. Like
I've
would be
heard...
so good as a bartender.
Well, like it really catered to my ADHD because at every second I was being distracted by a new customer coming up. And this is like, I hope this isn't like poo-pooing on like, not poo-pooing, that's not the right word. I hope this doesn't like agitate any actual bartenders. But I gotta say, that was
good at it.
The hardest job. No, I was gonna say that was the hardest job of my life last night, and it was fucking fake. I can't imagine what actual bartenders have to go through. Like there was always at least 3 aliens coming up to the bar, being like,
and I've heard that's the biggest problem with bartending. You know, they say it all the time.
Well, there's this one drink that was so goddamn complicated. I don't remember what it was called. But it was like called the Galactic spritz or something.
Sure.
Oh my God, it's the hardest fucking drink, and I always knock it over with my robot hands because I don't know what I'm doing in VR.
You knock it over.
But they always like request like you can like get the cup heated or ice, and then you got to put all the stuff in it. You got to get the
It's so high maintenance.
It's incredibly high maintenance. Some of these recipes literally have like 7 or 8 steps, and
Do
then
any of them
it's
have
like
egg white?
no, but some
always
have like
freaks me
a
out.
glow stick that comes in like a plutonium chamber.
Oh, you love that though.
But my little stupid VR hands can't always pull it out of the chamber the right way, and then it shatters, and then everything explodes.
You know, it's so wild to think about if those people were actually watching you do it and not realizing you were in VR, and they're like, "What is this person's problem?" Like, they're just like they can't pick up a glow stick. They're just like shoving drinks off the bar.
There's one alien. She's so nasty, and she's always the one who gets like the Galactic spritz or whatever it's called. She's like such a diva, and every time when I was first starting, now I'm like 100 drinks in, like I'm getting really good at making
Fucking
it.
good.
But the first few times I kept fucking up her order, and when I would hand it to her, she'd go, "Are you new here?" And I'd be like, "Yes, bitch, I am new here." Like,
Excuse me? What's her name? Like Glorg Karen? Glorg? That wasn't clever at all. I couldn't think of anything else.
But she was,
Karen 3000. I hate her.
I hate her. And she kept coming up to the bar. I was like, "Girl, you're getting fucked up tonight," because
Did she tip you at all?
She gave me a coin, one token.
God.
And the whole time she was like, "Are you new here?" And then she would leave, but then she'd come right back and order the exact same fucking drink again. So I guess she was liking it a little bit. But
she must have been.
Anyway, let's just say that it really absolutely hit all the dopamine receptors in my brain, and I ended up playing it and not even realizing that I stopped playing because the headset died, and it was 6:30 in the morning.
Oh,
I totally lost all.
Jesus.
I was just having so much fun, and I knew it was trouble because Allison walked in, and I knew that meant she had woken up and was starting work, and she was like, "What are you doing?" And so frantically, like it felt like a little out of my realm, but I was just like, "I'm bartending. I'm really busy right now. I'm on the clock." I'm
bartending. Karen 3000 is being a real witch, but I'm finally getting on her good side.
I was like, "You have no idea how stressful this job is. You have no idea." And she's like,
"I'm going to work, but I mean real work."
Yeah, I got paid $0 to literally make drinks for hours for people.
Don't sell yourself short. You got 1 coin.
I got more after her, but she really, I wanted to impress her, and I just kept disappointing her. But other than the Galactic spritz, I'm like getting real quick at it.
Spritz is like your white whale, you know.
Anyway, why do you drink?
Oh wow, that just got me good. I like that a lot. I can't wait to play it, even though I'll never play it, but can't wait. Maybe when I'm at your house I'll play it.
It's a good time.
Sounds fun. So I drink because I have another ghost update. I feel like I never end with these, and I'm not just making these up. Like, this is just, I feel like little pieces are coming together. And you know when they say you start looking into this stuff and it kind of starts to like you notice it more, or it happens more, like kind of spooky stuff. So I, the other day, was putting Leona in the car seat, and we were going to the little gym where we do her little gymnastics situation. And so we were going there, and I was putting her in the car seat, and the garage door was open. And it was, by the way, today it's 72 degrees out. That it was like a week ago or 5 days ago, and it was, I think, 22. It was insanely cold. And of course, I'm just like not wearing a bra, not wearing a jacket. Like, I'm freezing. Anyway, that's irrelevant. But this man walks by, and he's like, "Hello." And I'm like, well, instantly, I don't want to be part of this, right? So I'm like,
right,
"Hello." And I like put my child safely in the car seat and begin to walk into my car to be like, "Goodbye." And he says, "Hello. My girlfriend used to live here."
Oh God.
And I said, "What?" And I'm like, "In my garage?" You know,
like, did
my
she
brain,
die 400 years ago?
My
what happened?
brain, right? My brain doesn't compute. Then it occurred to me, okay, this abandoned dentist office was then turned into a house, which was then turned into my garage. So I'm like, "Oh, wow." And he goes, "Her name was Sasha." And I'm like, "Cool." You know, I don't know. And of course we're late for little Jim because it's me. And so I'm like, "Okay, bye." And he goes, and actually he goes, "Do you live on that corner?" And of course, me being me, I said, "Yes, I do." So now he knows me and my address. But
Christine,
well, I'm at my garage. It's hard. It's like, obviously, you know, anyway. So he goes, "That's where I grew up." And I went, what? And he goes, yeah, I lived there back in like the 80s. And I said, oh my gosh, that's pretty cool. And he goes, this is not a joke. This is literally what this man says to me. He looks me in the eye and he says, have you seen the spirits? And I went, sorry. So I handed Leona her tablet, put on Miss Rachel, and said, okay, now you have my attention. Like, what spirits? I'm like, if this man's going to kidnap me, he's already won. Like, he got me.
He said the right
me.
thing.
He did. And he said, oh, well, there are, he's like,
hang on. Sidetrack for a second. So he lived in the house and his girlfriend lived in in your now garage.
Yes.
So like they were literally like sweethearts next door.
I think so. The girl next door. And, looking back, like, I know that my current house used to be used as tenement housing, like low income housing, and they split it into multiple apartments, like not big ones, but like 2 or 3. Like it was like a multi-family home before it was turned into just like one home. And so he either lived in like the upstairs or the downstairs. I'm not sure. But so back then in the 80s, like it was used as like a smaller. So I guess the house next door was it was smaller because obviously now it's my garage, but I think it was a single family home back then. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess the girl lived next door. I didn't even think about that.
That's wild.
Very cute.
Okay, so anyway, the spirits.
Yeah, so he told me a story about how he shot a gun out the window and it hit a tree, and I was like, okay, I want to hear more about the other thing.
Right.
But thank you. And he's like, the bullet hole's probably still in the tree, and I was like, cool, I will be looking for that.
Sir, we're derailing. We're derailing.
Get back to the point. It's 22 degrees. And he said, oh, we saw them all the time. And I'm like, can you tell me what spirits you saw? Like, what are the stories? And he said, oh, well, we saw all sorts of things. He said, when I was 3, I was standing at the top of the stairs and I was looking down and okay, this is another thing. He said, my dad was a brick mason and he had a bar in the basement. And I'm like, of my house? What? And he's like, yeah, like obviously an unsanctioned bar. And my basement's a dirt floor, like cellar. And I'm like, whoa, that's spooky.
That was a speakeasy, my friend.
Yeah, yes, like literally underground speakeasy. And I'm like, honestly, the way that this basement looks, it would be a pretty baller, like speakeasy. And
which
so
means it's possible. So I don't know why we haven't set it up yet.
Well, maybe we have. It's just not on the record. No, we have not, but we will. And I need your help with all the glow sticks. You're the bartender.
We're gonna make Galactic spritz like you wouldn't believe.
We're gonna make underground bathtub Glorg 3000. It's gonna be delicious, and we're gonna charge out the nose. So yeah, he's like, I'm standing at the top of the stairs, like trying to like peek in, see what my dad's doing down there. And he says, all of a sudden someone, and he's like 3 or 4, he's like, someone just pushed my back and I fell all the way down the stairs. And he said, I landed at the bottom, thankfully, like, okay, no broken bones. And he's like, but I looked up and there was just a man glaring at me from the top of the stairs.
Harry.
Well, I was worried and I was like, well, Harry doesn't seem very mean, but maybe.
Girl, you're about to have a 3 or 4-year-old.
Please, I know, and
be careful.
I was like, that's not good. And he's like, yeah, it was absolutely terrifying. And then he said one night, my mom, or no, he was he's like, I was sharing a bed with my mom. I was like a little kid. And he's like, my sister had just been born and was in a crib next to the bed. And he said one night he woke up and saw a woman just staring down at the baby, like as she slept, and was just standing there like staring down at the baby. And he's like, I was so scared I just pulled the covers over my head, and the next time I looked she was gone. And I'm like, I don't know about this. It's all about kids and babies.
But what room was it? Like, was it actually Leona's room, or could it be your room and someone's fucking staring at you?
No, it was my room. It was my room.
Okay, so someone's staring at you while you're sleeping is what I just heard.
Well, I did get poked in bed once, and I was like, maybe it's my imagination, but then it wasn't even poked. Somebody ran their finger down my arm, and I was like, I must be imagining this. So I never said it out loud because I thought, well, it was just my imagination, but I feel like now's the time to tell you.
Okay, good time.
Anyway,
definitely weird that there's a female ghost and a male ghost.
Yeah.
The male ghost seems violent against children.
Yeah.
And the female ghost stares at people while you put a fucking camera in your own room while you're sleeping. I dare you.
Oh, God. We did that once, but we just caught Gio humping our pillows.
Amazing. I I do think it'd be cool. Look, I already, with the time difference and everything, and I already stay up late. What if I did 24/7 surveillance and just like checked in every now and then? If there was like a motion detected, I would open up the camera to let you know in real time if I see something.
And it's just always moonshine, but it might not be one day, you know?
And it's just you drooling and like catching your own spit while you sleep or
Stop
something.
telling people that story. Change the topic. Change the subject immediately. I know that's all you want. You just want footage of it, of my creepy sleep habits.
I do think it'd be really cool if on site in the moment, I like someone from far away gets like a motion alert on their phone and I check on you and there's a fucking woman staring at you.
Oh my God.
I'd be texting. I'd be like, please wake up, please wake up.
Oh, and he said, oh yeah, I'd be like, and then you'd catch me going, fucking M, and like throwing my phone down. Yeah, our friendship would be fractured. Also, he said the other thing he can think of is that his mom would always complain that when she got up in the morning, all the cabinets and drawers were open. And I was like, thank God that has not happened to me yet.
Except you just said it out loud in the house.
I know. What's wrong with me? And I was like, that sounds poltergeist behavior.
Did you get this person's number?
So his name is John, and I think, or he said he put his initials on the back of the house, and he's like, you can probably still find them. He's like, I painted them when I was little, which I thought was very cute. But he is currently unhoused, so I don't think he had a cell phone number. So I was like, okay, well, you know where I live, so I'm sure we'll run into each other again, and I can come prepared this time with more questions. But yeah, it was quite a conversation. And then he's like, anyway, have a good day. And I went to Little Jim like, what the fuck?
Oh my God. Okay, so at least you've been warned about these. It sounds like that was an attachment with the family though, right?
You know what? That's a great point, and I'm going to tell myself that just to feel better. But it's probably true. It sounds like the mom and the son had a bunch of experiences.
Well, hey, that also like confirms, remember you said you felt like there was a woman downstairs and
yes, true.
And like who like hugged you on Halloween or something?
I forgot about that.
So maybe you have gotten some confirmation that they like you. Maybe they just didn't like that family.
Maybe not. Maybe we did. I don't know what I did right. I'm sure it's nothing good.
Maybe Harry saw that 4-year-old and went, time to go. And like just kicked him down the stairs.
Yeah, I don't know. And I think the biggest fun fact about that whole thing was my dad had a bar in the basement for people to come and drink, and I was like,
well, we have to go investigate next time I'm there,
right? I was like,
There's
would
gotta
never
be a
have
beer
known
can,
that.
something down there still.
Because it's a dirt basement, so I bet, oh my God, I'm getting my metal detector out. I'm literally texting my mother right now.
And that one I feel like isn't bad. Like you can ethically metal detect your own home.
My property, right? So the person who wrote in and said, like just be cautious about telling everyone to go metal detect, which is a very fair point. Respect spaces and places that are not yours. But they said like, oh, to your heart's content, can you metal detect your own property? So I'm like, great, finally, I have something. Blaze's gonna be like, why did you dig a giant hole in the basement? I'm like, well, I had to find out.
We'll do it when I'm there, and then you can just blame me.
Oh, he won't ask then. He'll know it was you. He'll be like,
okay.
Oh man, M showed up and now there's a giant hole in the basement. What a mystery.
I'll fill it up. It's going to be there for a second. I'll put it back.
I won't. You will though. So maybe I'll wait for you. Anyway,
that sounds real fun.
That's my ghost update.
That's the best one you've had so far.
I almost called you and then I was like, I have to tell you on the podcast,
6 years of that relationship, you and
me.
Of
it's a
never
weird
being allowed
dynamic.
to just say something.
Or Eva will ask us something. We'll be like, shut up, Eva. I'm not saying that yet.
Yeah, Eva said something recent. I don't know. Maybe not recently. I feel like she said something and I heard you go, stop.
That's between you and me for 2 more minutes. And then we can talk about it
later. Well, okay. So I'm a bartender and you have a bar is what those were the updates.
It's fate, I think.
So, I mean,
we got to make it a Galactic bar now.
You said it, not me. And you're right also.
It's real. It's the truth.
Oh man. Well done on that intro, Christine. I think you really nailed it today.
My headache's getting worse. My headache's just getting so much worse. When does Tylenol kick in?
We also, I just want to throw this out there for a fun fact. Another reason why we should drink today is because this is episode 323.
Okay.
And this is the first time ever, we are recording it on 323. Ain't that fun?
Ain't that fun?
Now, ain't that something?
You know what else? This is our 6th year and we did a 666 theme. We're about to do episode 333, which I'm pretty sure is like, monumental in
devilish.
some way, right? Like, because it's
Yeah.
half of 666, so we'll just double it.
Maybe for episode 666, we record in your dirty basement and make it a bar.
In my dirty basement. I like the thought that in like 7 more years, my basement will still be just as dirty and not a bar yet.
Christine, it will be. It will be.
It will be. Okay, I'm sorry.
Because Blaze never let me put the hole back.
No.
And so now it's just even worse.
It all started. I tried to get my metal detector out and I was prevented. We could have had something beautiful.
Okay. For 323, I've got a spooky episode, and it's about a curse that maybe you've heard of. I don't know if you've heard of it. I think you have.
Okay.
It's the curse of Macbeth. Have you heard of it?
Oh, yes. Yes, this is a theater thing. I was never invited into the theater circles, even though I tried to force my way in. But I did.
Even though your literal job now is to go to the theaters.
Correct.
Okay.
Like, yes, you read that correctly, and I still hold a little resentment about it, but it's fine. I want to be a theater kid. I would think I was in the wrong circles they weren't very inviting. Let's put it that way.
I think I was I think I was kind of meant to be a theater kid, and I didn't end up there.
Yeah.
I knew of theater kids, and I know the stereotype of theater kids, and I feel like I did have the
we
theater
do
kid
fit
energy.
a lot of the tropes, right? Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, I think I didn't let myself go there.
Yeah, I can see that happening, and I love that I'm the opposite, where I tried so hard, and they were like, "You're really not welcome here." But we wish M would show up, and I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds right." But I think it was just the circles I happened to find were maybe not, because I'm sure a lot of people listening are like, "Oh, I've never met like really not very nice theater kids." I don't know. I feel like the trope is that they're very inviting to outcasts and that kind of thing. And I did not have that experience, unfortunately. But
yeah, fair enough.
I've heard about the Macbeth curse.
Yeah, I'd heard about it. Also, as we say the word Macbeth a bunch of times, if this show goes awry for some reason, it'll be because of the curse and not because we're terrible with our own tech issues.
We should just say it every episode just in case something goes wrong. Be like, it's not our fault.
It's either PTD or Macbeth, I tell you. But yeah, I'd always heard about the Macbeth curse, but didn't really know what it was about. I just kind of knew like, oh, you don't say Macbeth in a theater.
Right.
And it was bad luck, allegedly, but I didn't know the history to it. So let's get into it. So, and just because you were also in 10th grade once, have you read Macbeth?
I have.
Thoughts?
I'm sure it was great.
Okay, me too.
I probably didn't really read it, is what I'm trying to say. I probably just skimmed it and pretended like I read it.
I can nearly confirm for you I didn't read it.
Yeah. I think both of us probably did the same thing.
Not a single book in high school English did I ever read. I truly was the Spark Notes kid, and I got in trouble every time. And guess what? I still graduated. So sorry about that.
So that's our advice to all the teens out there.
Look at us. Look at us. Read some Spark Notes, and you could be a star tender on the Intergalactic Bartender Academy, just like me.
Sorry. Wow, that really did come full circle for you. I'm so impressed.
So here's a little summary for Macbeth in case you are unaware. And also if you didn't read it. Like
I'm
me.
thoroughly aware and I know every plot point, but for everybody else who's listening who has never read it, I'd love a refresher for them. That's
so generous of you. I'll make sure to do it. So
I know.
This summary, this is just a real quick one, and this is a quote. 3 witches tell the Scottish general named Macbeth that he will be king, and encouraged by his wife, Macbeth kills the king to become the new king, and then kills more people out of paranoia, and civil war erupts. So there, the end. That's really all I needed to know from 10th grade. Fun fact, Macbeth was produced in, or at least around 1606, and it was probably inspired by then King James VI of Scotland, who also went by James I of England, which love that he came up with 2 different identities.
You gotta sometimes, see which one sticks.
It's like, this isn't complicated enough. Let's change the numbers. Let's change the location.
Someday in high school, a bunch of teenagers will really not want to learn about this. We got to complicate things as much as possible.
So, in case you do not remember the name James I of England, he was also mentioned in our episode 230, which was literally 100 episodes ago.
Oh, boy.
when we were talking about Agnes Sampson.
Aha, yes.
So, and Agnes Sampson was convicted for witchcraft and plotting against King James. So a brief recap on James himself. When his mom, who was Mary Queen of Scots, when she had to abdicate the throne, he was crowned king as a literal baby. Like younger than Leona. Like,
boy.
Imagine Leona is queen and you just have to sit there.
I
and
just
like,
got rid of my headache, and now you're bringing it back. Thank you.
I'm sorry, she is an actual queen. Let's start there.
Say, she already thinks that, I think. Anyway.
So I can't imagine like just holding a baby and like having to do everything for the baby and being like, apparently you rule the country.
Apparently you're my boss.
Yeah.
And you get to say like when we go to war and stuff. But
like I'm gonna be so uncomfortable when the teen years hit and you hate me because I'm in so much danger.
Yeah. Or when you're feeling like kind of like hormonal, and then all of a sudden like you decide that we're going to war. It's like, come on.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's a lot.
So I guess the second he became king, because he was a little baby and very, very vulnerable, people immediately started trying to assassinate King James, the baby.
Baby.
I think because they were like, now's our time
That's
to
insane.
overthrow, because he can't do anything about it. So this included Guy Fawkes blowing up Parliament eventually. I mean, it goes on forever. He starts as a baby, and then King James just lives his whole life pretty much in constant fear as people try to assassinate him to become king.
Oh my God.
So one day his wife sails to England, or is sailing to England, and a storm stops her ship. And King James is like, I'm going to come get you, girl. And he decides that he's going to sail on over to her boat with his boat. But then another storm comes through and also destroys his boat. So basically, he takes this one struggle and really, extrapolates it into a whole way of living. So his wife, who was sailing to England, she was sailing from Denmark, where she's from. And this was at a time when Denmark was going through its real like witch panic phase. And the Danes at this point were blaming a lot of storms on witchcraft, which if you've listened to our rituals episode on weather witches, I think we touched on this exact story there. So he hears when he's trying to like rescue his bride, and the storm keeps getting in their way, and she's straight from Denmark. He overheard in some capacity, oh, the witches are causing this and you can't get to your wife. So he just found witches to be yet another threat against him. And he becomes obsessed with witchcraft. Who didn't at this time?
Yeah.
And in 1597, he publishes the book Demonology, and he passes the 1604 Act against witchcraft. And this act,
this was his way of, sorry to interrupt you, but I feel like this was his way of taking all of that like targets against him that he couldn't control and being like, well, this is one I can actually target.
Yeah, he's projecting.
On. Yeah, exactly. Like he's lumping it all into one target.
Yes, he's like, this is something I can actually control. And that's what we're going to do. So he passes an act, the 1604 Act against witchcraft. And this act makes it mandatory to hang people convicted for witchcraft. Okay. And it doesn't matter what they've done. They could have done nothing wrong so far, just been accused. Boom, dead.
That's bad.
Which is why I talked about Agnes Sampson with him, because I think it was like the worst outside of Salem. It was like the worst witch trial. Or roll the tape, go 100 episodes back. Whatever I said then is what I meant. And so at these witch trials, another weird thing about it is that he is the one that is like trying the witches and interrogating them, and like he's very involved, like a little too involved.
Yeah.
Where usually they would just have the townspeople handle this. But again, I think he just wants to control something, and this is something he feels he can control. So this whole time period in this area of the world is all about witches, kings being assassinated or trying to be assassinated, treason. They're very major themes in whatever their version of pop culture is at the time. And this leads to Shakespeare having some inspiration. He's like, I'm going to write me a real humdinger. And he writes Macbeth.
I see.
And he even performs it in front of the king himself, which is like such a
Oh,
bold move.
brazen.
Can you imagine? Like, and also, like, spoiler alert, the king didn't like Macbeth. So, like, can you imagine being Shakespeare and, like, you're like, I wrote this for you, and you were my inspiration for the whole story. And you're at his, like, royal court performing it just for him. And then he's just like, I hate it.
You're either, like, so ignorant to the situation, or you're just, like, so ballsy that you pulled it off either way. You know what I mean? Like, you went through with it anyway. I can't decide.
Yeah. Macbeth wasn't the only tragedy that day. It was
oh,
that's all I'm gonna say.
That's what we saw in the paper when what's that guy who critiques all the movies?
I don't know.
The famous one.
I'm gonna age myself.
M. Schultz.
Oh,
I don't know. I don't know the guy.
I was gonna age myself and say like that felt like a Perez Hilton headline. Of like,
well, I'm aging myself because I'm talking about Roger Ebert, who I think is like way older than Perez Hilton. I think Perez Hilton might be like the millennial reference. So
okay, sure.
I follow that.
So, anyway, he writes Macbeth for the king, or is inspired by the king. And another fun fact: this Macbeth is where we get lines like "double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble." We also get the line "something wicked this way comes," and this is where we get there's a little not controversy, but one of the theories is that Macbeth is where we get ingredients like eye of newt and toe of frog. So I know that you've said that you've described like, oh, it wasn't really an eye of newt, it was like a mustard seed because it looked like an eye of newt. But I guess one of the original legends to these witchcraft ingredients was that they were code to disguise recipes in front of other people. But if you said it like that, then people, I guess you were kind of leading that you were into witchcraft or something. But all of that information comes from a book in 1985 by an author named Scott Cunningham, who I guess was spreading a lot of misinformation about witchcraft at the time. And so we don't know if that code was real or not. I could see it being real. Like, that's definitely a believable fact. But as far as we know, the first time phrases like eye of newt ever popped up in any writing was Macbeth, which is definitely older than 1985. So,
okay, I see. And 1985, we're talking satanic panic. Like, who knows what kind of stuff was spreading?
Exactly. So Shakespeare, also in the, like I said, in the summary of Macbeth, there are 3 witches. And Shakespeare wrote these witches, named them basically the Weird Sisters. And he wrote them so compelling that a rumor starts after people start seeing this play.
Oh.
The rumor is that Shakespeare actually stole real spells from a real grimoire to write the opening act, or the opening of Act 4.
Ooh.
And when witches found out that he stole their spells for his play, they cursed anyone performing the play for using their spells for entertainment.
Oh my.
And that's where we start with the curse of Macbeth.
I didn't know that.
And now you do.
That's spooky.
So it all really starts from like the very first performance of Macbeth. No performance has ever been safe, apparently.
Oh God.
Where when Shakespeare is performing it in front of King James, the actor playing Lady Macbeth died, I'm so sorry because you have a headache right now, of a fever.
What?
So do you have a fever? Are you feeling warm right now, Christine?
No. I am now, but I think that's hypochondria. Wait, so she died during the performance?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my, what?
Well, and by she, I gotta say, this was a time when men were doing all the parts.
Sure.
So it was an actor named Hal Berridge playing Lady Macbeth.
My God.
And he died so suddenly that Shakespeare himself had to step in and like understudy for him for the first performance ever in front of the king. No wonder he was like, I didn't like the play. Someone died in front of me.
I feel like he would love that. I feel like he'd be wow, that really added some dimension to this thing, you know?
It's so messed up, but you're totally right. And so from the get-go,
holy shit,
Macbeth has been cursed. In the later 1600s, there was an actor named Henry Harris who played the character Macduff. And in the play, there's this big duel scene where Macduff and I think Macbeth are fighting or sword
Right.
fighting. So in the 1600s, one actor playing Macduff, he was in the duel scene. Both actors had real swords because it was the 1600s.
Jeez.
And Henry accidentally ran through Macbeth's actor and stabbed the guy in the eye and killed him on stage in front of everybody.
Oh my God.
In 1882, it was a closing night performance, and one of the actors, also part of the duel scene, accidentally stabbed his co-star in the chest, and that actor barely survived.
Jesus. What? They're still using these real swords?
They sure are, all the way into 47, when another actor accidentally stabbed his co-star in the chest during the duel scene, and this time ultimately killed the actor.
Oh my gosh.
I think that actor had to go through 2 major surgeries for his wounds and then died from either the actual injury or the side effects of the surgery.
Horrific.
Fun fact, the actor who died, he allegedly still haunts the Oldham Theatre in Manchester, and he is seen on Thursdays, which is the day he was stabbed. I love that he keeps a calendar still.
I have other plans on the other days.
Yeah, he's like, you can catch me on the weekly anniversary, but other than that, I'm not available.
I would haunt that place too.
Yeah, I would haunt maybe the guy who stabbed me.
Oh, that's
for
true.
a little bit. So also all the way in the 1970s, this is still happening. In the 1970s, there was a crew that was unloading equipment with a crane, getting ready for the show that night. And a random guy stopped by, saw the crew working, and was like, "Hey, what play is performing here later?" And as the stagehand said Macbeth, a prop spear fell from the crane and stabbed the guy that just was walking by.
Oh my God. The guy who asked what play it is?
Famous last words. Another time in Amsterdam, and by the way, in the show, Macbeth kills King Duncan. So the actor playing Macbeth in this particular production, the actor playing Macbeth was sleeping with the guy who was playing Duncan's wife in real life.
Oh, I thought you were going to say with the guy who's playing Duncan. I was like, ooh, spicy. This is less fun. Less fun.
It's still spicy, but like in a messy way. Like,
and like way dramatic. Sure.
Yeah. So the two of them hated each other because I think the guy who was playing Duncan knew that the guy who was playing Macbeth was sleeping with his wife.
Bad.
And so they already had tension, and the guy playing Macbeth during their fight scene in the play brought a real fucking knife on stage and in front of everybody stabbed the guy playing Duncan.
Duncan. No.
In 1937, which I
He's
guess
like,
we're going
no,
back
it was
in time.
it was just a curse. And they're like, we saw you stab him with your knife. He's like, it was a curse. I couldn't help it.
I wonder if he was like really hoping that would be the storyline
Would,
people
like,
ran with.
cover-
Of, like I didn't know it wasn't a prop. Which like
Oops.
one time I will say I had one of those like retractable fake
geez.
knives, and I really accidentally swapped them out. I accidentally swapped them out and like went to like show somebody and like ends up stabbing my own
At
hand.
least on yourself, I hope.
On myself.
Okay,
yeah.
good. That could have been
But
worse, I think.
But I remember thinking like, oh my God, what if I pretended to stab my friend?
Well, I mean, not to like pull up this whole thing, but like the Alec Baldwin with the prop gun, it's like this shit really still happens.
It very much still happens. So I wonder if that was the storyline he was hoping people would think of like, oh, I didn't know it wasn't a prop knife. Which is not the Alec Baldwin story, by the way.
No.
But so that guy got stabbed. In 1937, a rope was holding a weight backstage that somehow snapped. The weight snapped and came crashing down onto the stage, broke one of the actor's swords, and that piece of the sword flew into the audience and killed a man who was sitting in the audience.
Oh my! So even the audience is not safe.
Yeah, it's scarily interactive for everybody, this curse.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I think something happened with that guy where he didn't like get stabbed. He like got hit by the sword and like it scared him enough. It scared him into a heart attack and he died. Like something even more crazy.
Oh, God.
That same theater group, by the way, who experienced that, They also saw the director and their actress get into car accidents the week before, and other other actors ended up slowing down production with their own issues, including one who had a really, really terrible case of losing their voice. Another person was grieving their dog who had just died during production, and then that same actress who was grieving her own dog had a heart attack during the final dress rehearsal.
What the fuck?
And years later, the show Macbeth was going to perform at this venue again, and it hadn't since that production. And so they're like, we're going to have a portrait of that actress who died during the dress rehearsal. We're going to have a portrait of her in her honor at the theater now that Macbeth is playing here again. And on opening night, that portrait flew off the wall and shattered onto the ground.
Oh my God.
In 1970, another actor playing Macbeth died of a heart attack on stage.
Oh no.
And another time, a critic who came to the show and gave it a bad review died of a heart attack.
So wait, hold on. This curse is like indiscriminate. It's like, well, we don't like the play, but you also can't like it.
Well, I feel kind of scared now as someone with multiple heart conditions, and I just said I never read it, and I keep saying the word Macbeth. I'm a little terrified on my own show right now. So, whatever I need to do, good vibes, good vibes.
That's it. That's all you got to do, I think.
And this is where we switch over, where I just tell you about the fires.
Oh, God. Oh, Jesus. Okay.
So another time, this was in 1721. There was a real douchebag in the audience. Let's just start there. Okay. He was apparently a nobleman, which who cares? He sat on the stage during the play. He didn't sit in his seat. He sat on the stage while everyone was acting.
What a weirdo.
And then saw a friend of his in the audience. So he got up in the middle of everyone acting and walked across the stage to say hi mid-scene.
What a lunatic. What a weird thing to do.
Truly, just like, I can't think of a more narcissist move ever.
It's so bizarre.
Yeah, like, okay, buddy. So anyway, the actors were like pissed that this guy was ruining their scene. And I guess they weren't very much the show must go on people, where they were like, well, we'll just ignore it and keep acting. They really were like, fucking get out of here. We don't want you here. So they chased him out of the theater with their real swords.
Honestly, okay, I'm going to hear how the story ends first before I make any commentary.
No, you're allowed to, because then that douchebag guy came back with his friends all like hurt that he got embarrassed publicly, and he set the building on fire and burnt the theater to the ground.
What a lunatic.
And then we don't know if he ever got caught or anything. We don't know.
What a lunatic.
Well, like, I'm sure his wife was accused of witchcraft, you know? So,
right. Like, get a grip, dude. Jesus.
He sounds like someone who would absolutely accuse his wife of witchcraft, because she like didn't smile.
Just out of like convenience, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
In 1928, at the Royal Court Theatre in London, this was Macbeth's very first modern dress production, where people were just in their normal clothes.
Okay.
And set pieces kept falling apart. Production had intense tech issues. And even one of the set pieces, it fell and injured a bunch of actors. And I guess later also caused a fire. And then in 1953, the actor playing Macbeth's tights,
Wait, what?
in a courtroom, I don't know how this would fucking stand. But apparently, the actor playing Macbeth's tights somehow got soaked in kerosene. And he later got burns on stage. Do
you know how stupid I am? Why I was like, what? I thought you said the actor playing Macbeth's tights. And I was like, that's a role in this play?
Oh,
I thought you meant like the actor who was performing as
the person playing Christine's t-shirt.
Yeah, I was like, this is a modern performance. I was like, wow, that is over my head. I don't get it, but I'm sure it was great. So
yeah,
stupid.
In recent years, they've had people playing Macbeth's joggers. I don't know if you knew that, but
his Crocs in sports mode and not sports mode.
It takes two different people for that. That's a swing ensemble or something.
I heard one of them was sleeping with the other one's wife. Just saying. I don't want to be dramatic, but
can you imagine the storyline of like, and then the left tight stabbed the right tight?
Who's playing the Crocs? Wait, what? That's not part of the story. Just let me get to the point. Oh, man.
Truly a modern retelling. Yeah.
Beautiful.
So in the same performance where this guy's tights got soaked in kerosene, again, zero context to that, In the same performance, the actors that played soldiers storming the castle, they had real torches on stage.
Oh no.
And a strong wind blew through the theater and the flames flew into the audience.
Oh no, that's even worse.
I feel like with enough bad luck, why would someone say, let's bring fire to the party?
Like,
you know?
at a certain point, you gotta just do all prop stuff, like all rubber. Yeah.
Fake fire, everything.
Just
Fake
can't-
everything.
can't
Just
be.
do it on Zoom at this point, just
You
so
do
nobody...
a virtual show, yeah.
Do it like Ratatouille and on TikTok where everyone
musical.
was in their own individual Zoom camera.
So safe, so comfortable.
By the way, I feel like we don't ever talk about that Ratatouille
It's
experience.
not incredible how it just like came and went so fast, and it's like it was such a monumental moment, and then it just like passed to the next thing.
There's like that meme going around of like some, I don't know, idiot person was like, oh well, the COVID didn't really cause any mental illness for people, and then people are just replying with like the ways that they had clearly fucking lost their minds. I haven't seen it anywhere, but my little note to that would be I stayed up all night to watch the Ratatouille from TikTok.
Okay, that's what it was. It was like it was like from The Guardian. It was like new study shows that mental illness did not increase during lockdown or something, and everyone's retweeting it with like, well, I befriended like a mouse that lived in my apartment, or like my friend built a whole paper mache friend, or I don't know.
My favorite was this one person was like, my roommate and I had a corner called the glass corner where we would just shatter our beer bottles.
It's like a whole corner, just glass. Oh, God.
Anyway, my note to that would be the Ratatouille. It like not just me staying up to watch it, but the amount of people it took to create the Ratatouille.
Yes. Just like working together.
That was
from
clearly
afar.
global mental illness.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Anyone who was buying into that, which was like everyone.
Everyone, me too.
Shared
entirely.
delusion, like folia de shared delusion, all just mentally ill.
I literally bought and brava to everyone who chipped in and was like, you know what? This is an unprecedented time. And everyone is really just looking for any excitement anywhere. So we're going to lean into it. And literally Playbill created a playbill for the Ratatouille. Taxi cabs were like showing it on their neon lights above their cars.
Yes.
Like there were billboards in like Times Square for the Ratatouille. And I literally bought 2 of the playbills. And it was just so one day our kids could bring them to history class for show and tell to be like, this is how far we slipped.
Yeah,
like,
this is talk about mental illness.
Yeah, but in the best way. It was like such a collaborative, community-based experience of like, we got nothing to do. We're just all inside. Wayne Brady is Ratatouille.
And Wayne Brady is also here, and we're gonna make something thoroughly unhinged. Wayne Brady is playing Ratatouille's tights, and he's gonna do a kick-ass job.
I still think it was one of the best things to come out of COVID, which, that says not too much, but I think in the world of COVID, I knew everything was going to be okay after the Ratatouille.
Yeah, we sort of like thought, we're coping,
Yeah.
we're coping.
We're coping. It doesn't look like that, maybe, but, we're doing what we
It's
can.
hard to believe, but just trust me.
Anyway, what a tangent. Fire. There's fire everywhere in every theater.
Cool.
So in 1926, let's just keep going with the fires. In 1926, there was one production that had several costumes catch on fire. I don't know if they were also soaked in kerosene. There were more set pieces that kept falling apart. There were multiple robberies, and the lead actor got so exhausted from probably literally putting out fires that he quit. And then he got replaced by someone, and this replacement, I guess, hadn't practiced as much stage combat as he had, and nearly killed Lady Macbeth's actress.
Ugh.
In 1971, there was a production that had 2 fires during its time and 7 robberies.
What is these robberies? Like they're just pickpocketing people in the audience?
I don't know. Like, are they
so strange.
stealing Macbeth?
What are they robbing? Like a fake sword? A real sword? I don't know.
Fire? I don't know. And then on top of all the fires, there were also riots. So there was a
boy.
riot in 1849. There were two actors who were really duking it out with each other. One guy named William Charles Macready and another named Edwin Forrest. The very, very quick down low I could get on this was down low, lowdown. The 411.
Give me the DL.
Give me the down low.
Oh no, I think you say on the DL. On the down low, but then you say,
what's the
give
lowdown?
me the lowdown. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You are so welcome.
So, honestly, going back to TikTok, if this was a relevant feud today, I would know everything about it if I just searched their names and TikTok would have told me everything about their fight.
We'd figure it out quickly.
But what I could find in a moment's notice between William Charles Macready and Edwin Forrest is that the U.S. felt that William represented hoity-toity England and the wealthy British elite, whereas Edwin was representing U.S. laborers. And in 1949, this turned into an all-out class war, and William was starring in a Macbeth production, and then blocks away, just to spite him, Edwin, who was following his tour. It sounds like stalking.
Yeah.
He was also starring as Macbeth right down the road in a different production,
boy.
just to fuck with him. So it sounds like Edwin was the messy one, and he was messy enough that he had 10,000 messy followers, and all of them showed up to William's production to protest, and it turned into a riot where around 30 people died.
Oh my God.
And over 100 people were injured.
God.
10,000 supporters.
Yeah.
And this was before social media. This was literally 1849. How were they all finding out about this?
What are you doing?
How did 10,000 people organize? Okay. Another time, there was another actress who played Lady Macbeth. Her name was Sarah Siddons. And I think it's Siddons. And people apparently hated that she got the role. So when she showed up, angry mobs would try to attack her. And she ended up getting into the green room or backstage on her own. But people still sneered her performance when she was up on stage.
Oh.
They damaged the theater. And this caused ticket prices to go up so that the theater could cover repairs. But then it became a whole other riot because then people had to spend more money to see her. And she ended up, by the way, Sarah ended up briefly retiring because of this, because the stress was too much. But then she started acting again and became the first woman to ever play Hamlet.
Fuck yeah.
So good for Sarah.
Suck it, haters.
Another famous Lady Macbeth, her name was Diana Wynard. I really hope I'm saying that right. Theater kids are going to scream. Diana
Clearly, I wasn't
Wynard.
welcome, so I can't tell you.
So there's a sleepwalking scene in the show, and
she
during
says,
her
spot, something about a spot.
Oh yeah, she does.
Yeah, spot, get out or something. Let me see. Spot, out, damn spot. That's what I meant. Yeah. Out, damn spot. Because she sees in her dream state the blood. It's the guilt is eating her alive.
Interesting. I remember doing a whole project on that exact scene, not knowing what was going on.
No clue. You were like, she had a stain, Time to Go wasn't around, I guess. I don't know. It was very confusing.
I remember my friend Rachel sticking her hands in spaghetti sauce and then me filming her just walking around. She closed her eyes with spaghetti sauce all over her.
You were like, I think this is exactly what happened in the book, in the play.
I'm like, our teacher's going to fucking love this.
She's going to eat it
up. So during the sleepwalking scene, this actress fell off a 15-foot stage platform.
Oh, fucking hell.
She ended up being fine, but the night before, she had actually been telling reporters she didn't believe in the Macbeth curse.
Well.
What do you know?
Dangerous.
So in 1940, there was a director named Margaret Webster who got appendicitis, and then when she recovered, the actress playing Lady Macbeth got laryngitis, and so the director stepped in for the actress that night, but then she ended up getting another whole illness, and on top of all that, other curse incidents were that actors were getting into vehicle accidents, costumes and props kept vanishing, the power kept going out, there were other additional tech issues, and people were getting sick left and right. And there was even one production where 26 cast and crew members came down with different sicknesses, all one after another, after other setbacks had already delayed the show several months.
At that point, like, you just gotta read the writing on the wall, right? You know, like,
I know.
Let's just give it up. Let's go perform, I don't know, Kinky Boots. That's the only thing I can think of. I've never seen it. I have no idea. But
it's either Macbeth or Kinky Boots. I've been telling them left and right.
Don't know the difference, to be honest.
Another director once came down with the shingles days before opening, and then actors all had several broken bones on stage.
Like, they broke them on stage, or they like came out with casts on?
No. Like they became broken during the play.
Oh God.
Yeah, yikes. In 1942, perhaps the most notorious production is when 3 actors died during production, including 2 of the witches.
That can't be real. Are you serious? 3?
Then on opening night, the set manager went into the theater's costume room and died by suicide. Which I don't know what their deal was, but if they also just saw multiple people die on stage, I don't know if that triggered something for them.
Clearly a very traumatizing event either way.
Yeah,
whether it's a curse or not. I mean, yikes.
Well, some even say that the Macbeth curse played a role in the Lincoln assassination, because Lincoln loved Macbeth and even said, it has been quoted saying, "I think nothing equals Macbeth. It is wonderful." And a week before his death, he was reciting Macbeth scenes with his friends, especially the scene where Macbeth assassinates King Duncan. And then a week later, he went to a play and got assassinated.
Ooh, I just got chills.
Like I said, a fun fact from earlier is that King James I did not like the play, which is so awkward for Shakespeare, but also awkward. Maybe he had a fucking feeling, you know? Like, he was like, yeah, something crazy's in the air.
Someone's hitting me wrong about this, you know?
Like, you've conjured something very odd in this play about witches. I don't know what it is.
Not to be dramatic, but I wonder if it's also like Shakespeare stepping in to actually perform in it. I feel like that just adds to the whole like creepiness factor.
Yeah. I feel like also, I guess it's Shakespeare, and I guess it's your moment in front of the king. Like, I'm sure you could come up with excuses, but if you just were performing for the first time ever a play in front of the king and someone died, maybe stop the play real quick.
Just like for a second.
Like I would, you know?
Yeah, I probably would too.
Anyway, that's just how I would handle it, but I guess they handled it differently.
I think you and I would not ever actually make it there, because we'd be so nervous backstage. We'd be like throwing up, and we'd be the dead ones, probably. I don't think we'd survive.
I don't think we would survive at all. So because King James I did not like this play so much, it ended up actually not being played in England for several years.
Oh, God.
And when it came back to England in 1703, the show returned to London, and opening night was interrupted by a freak windstorm equal to a Category 2 hurricane.
What?
And this storm ended up not only destroying thousands of buildings, but killed somewhere between 15 to 30,000 people.
Oh my God.
The first time the play came back.
A natural disaster occurred that was not known to be in England, of all things, like a typhoon.
Yeah. And
forget it.
And it still happens all the way into the 2000s. So in 2012 at the Sydney Opera House, the show was postponed because actors and the assistant director got severe food poisoning, leaving some of the people hospitalized. A year later, one actor was hit with a sword in an opening battle scene and had to be hospitalized after the show. Oh, no. And in 2018, there was an article that came out that an access manager at Shakespeare's Globe Theatre said he will never say Macbeth in a theater, which is kind of where this has all come from. Right. Like, a lot of people now don't talk about Macbeth in theaters.
I hope nobody's like working on set deck right now and it's like, well, shit.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, by the way, if you do work at a theater and you've been listening this whole time.
Late.
I like to think you just turned us off and you're like, this is maybe a car ride home show.
Yeah, let's wait till we're off the property.
So, apparently this guy who was doing the interview, he said that while touring in his last show, a fiddle player in the show said, "Oh, I used to study Macbeth in school," and said that at the theater. So like,
obviously not very well you studied it. You would have known better.
that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
That night during their show, 2 violinist strings snapped during the show. One dancer fell off the stage and another danced into a wall, which would be
That's me. Yeah, that's us. We'd be like, that was a curse again. I don't know.
Yeah,
it never
every
happened
time
before.
Every time I ever fall, I'm just going to be like, oh man, someone said Macbeth. I can't believe it.
I can't help it. Somebody's playing my podcast in a theater. It's this episode.
So it's become common knowledge in theaters to never say the word Macbeth or bad luck will fall on the show. And do you know what people say instead of Macbeth if they have to talk about it in a theater?
You know, I think I've heard this as a fun fact, but I don't remember.
I think because this is how I found out. I heard about it when I was in a theater and I heard someone say this phrase and I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? And they were like, we can't say
we can't tell you.
And I was like, well, that's eerie, but I sure need to know the information now. And it was before smartphones, so I couldn't like look it up myself. I was just like sitting in like angst.
You? Oh, okay. I thought it was like at one of our shows. I was like,
no. It was at like, it was in high school.
Highbrow conversation at one of our shows about
it was high school or college. It was a theater thing.
I wouldn't understand. Okay.
Right. But apparently what you say instead is you call it the Scottish play.
Oh, maybe I didn't know that. That's not familiar to me.
And if you're talking about Macbeth the person, you call him the Scottish king.
Ooh, okay.
And apparently productions that use sign language even sign Macbeth. They use the same sign for Scotland to censor the name.
No way.
Because they're so scared of saying it.
That's a really fun fact.
Probably the most fun fact of the episode.
Yeah.
There are also blogs and videos of actors talking about their own productions of Macbeth and how it cursed them. One anecdote was that this is from one guy who was performing, who said multiple actors got arrested throughout production for totally unrelated reasons.
What? So now it's just like criminal activity.
It's like Law and Order, it's natural disasters, it's everything. God. Despite all of this, some people are still skeptical and blame the coincidence on the play being 400 years old. And in that time, there's statistically a lot of room for many performances to have had moments of bad luck.
I can see that argument, but
that doesn't excuse all the other plays that have been around that long that don't have this same stereotype of being unlucky, including the Greek tragedy Oedipus that is 2,400 years old and nobody has ever called it cursed.
Well, it is cursed because do you know what that's about?
The Oedipus complex?
Oedipal complex, yes.
Oedipus complex?
I think it's Oedipus, I'm pretty sure, but I don't know. Yeah, so I guess it's already cursed. It didn't need an extra curse, you know?
Fair enough, but at least nobody's dying in fires and riots. So
yeah, they really took it and ran with it. This Macbeth, I'm like scared to say it now. And I'm in
the
my
Scottish
house.
play.
The Scottish play. Yeah, I like that. I like that little code word.
And if you do happen to say the word Macbeth in a theater, you're apparently supposed to like do a ritual in order to.
Yeah, what is that? Do you know what? Or you don't know what it is?
It sounds like it's kind of like every school and every production and every director has like their own silly thing.
Oh.
It's kind of like
kind of take it back. You're like, I'm sorry.
What's it like when like you want it to snow the next day, so you have a snow day and you do
wear
like
your
the little
pajamas
snow dance
inside out. You flush the toilet 7 times. Yeah,
everyone's got like it's a little different every time. Same thing here, where it sounds like essentially you go outside, you spin around a certain amount of times. One of the theories is that you spit over your shoulder, and then sometimes it depends on which shoulder. And then you have to do all this stuff, and you have to go knock on the theater door and let somebody welcome you back inside.
They have to be like, you've spun around enough and spit enough in the parking lot. We'll finally let you back in.
And apparently sometimes you have to say certain phrases or you have to quote certain things while you're doing all this stuff to manifest good luck. Ooh. And a lot of times the things you have to say are words from other Shakespearean plays.
Okay, that's kind of fun.
So one of them apparently is an excerpt from Hamlet. And this is the quote that, again, this isn't every time, but apparently this is what some people do. Imagine someone just spitting and spinning around while they say this. Angels and ministers of grace defend us. Be thou a spirit of health or goblin damned, being with thee airs from heaven or blasts from hell, be thy intents wicked or charitable. Thou comest in such a questionable shape that I will speak to thee. Which I can't imagine
Forget
memorizing
it.
that.
I don't even remember 2 words from that entire thing you just said to me.
That's called just having bad luck forever now, because
Sorry,
there's no
yeah.
way I'm going to be able to say
Do I
that.
get note cards? Like, I
Right.
don't know. It's just very complicated.
I feel like if you have to memorize that, no one's ever coming back from the bad luck.
Sorry.
So, anyway, you could say it with Hamlet excerpts. You could say it with probably other Shakespearean excerpts. You can dance around, maybe in your pajamas, flush the toilet a couple times. But anything that it takes to keep yourself from the Macbeth curse, and that's the story.
And that was really good. I
Thank
didn't know
you.
quite what to expect, but that was really good. I think curses are such an interesting concept that we don't really talk about too much. Like, I know you've done the curse of, what was that guy's car? Well, who's that guy who had a car and it's cursed?
Oh, Jim, not Jim Dean.
James
That's
Dean?
James
Jim
Dean.
Dean is the
Jimmy Dean's
sausage.
sausage.
That's also cursed. I'm just going to put it out there.
Yeah,
Okay. I don't think
definitely.
it's being said, but I'm going to say it.
James Dean. Yeah.
James Dean. Yeah, I feel like, wow, I think the concept of a curse is so fascinating.
I just hope to never come face to face with one.
Exactly. It's almost like I am interested in it, but I'm just going to let it sit there and not get too close because I don't want to be involved.
I'm interested in a way where I would like to be like Olivia Benson, and the curse is in the room with the like one-sided mirror.
Oh,
where,
yeah. One-way mirror. Yeah.
That way, like, I can see it fully and it just doesn't even know I'm there.
And you're also Olivia Benson, so it's a win-win.
Oh, Marishka. Take
love
me.
her. Gotta love her. Oh, okay. That was great, Em. I really, really liked that. Good job.
Thank you. Your turn to do a good job. Don't
Okay,
mess up.
well, I feel like you'll like this one, okay? I think you'll like it. This is the story of Burke and Hare. Do you know these folks? It's one of those
No.
where like they were like some of the original body snatchers from back in the day.
No, I don't.
Grave robbers, body snatchers, all that good stuff.
Burke and Hare.
Yes, they're two
Hare.
Hare.
Oh, like a bunny.
Yeah.
Burke and Bunny. Okay, got it.
Now you'll remember. So we're going. Guess where we're going? I didn't even put this together.
What, England?
Edinburgh, Scotland.
Oh gosh, I thought you were gonna say like King James I's castle on the Macbeth
maybe
performance stage.
I'm not that
Edinburgh.
great. Yeah, Edinburgh. So, over just a little quick side note for you. Edinburgh first began to grow as a settlement in the 12th century, and it became a big, prosperous city over the centuries. And so, during the late Georgian period, which is like when the Victorian era started, Edinburgh was the heart of the Scottish Enlightenment. And this was a time when philosophers, mathematicians, scientists, inventors all like kind of flocked to the city and tried to challenge like the old school way of doing things, tried to come up with a new approach, just, what you think of when you think of enlightenment, like just a new era of thinking.
Sure. Yeah.
So Voltaire, the French philosopher, once said, "We look to Scotland for all our ideas of civilization," which I did not know it was such a center for, I don't know.
It's the town of enlightenment, apparently.
Enlightenment, yeah, new wave thinking. But of course, there were major issues in the city, just like any big city. Poverty and overcrowding being the main ones.
Mm-hmm.
As more and more people moved to town, middle and upper class people started sharing streets and even buildings with the working class, God forbid. This was unheard of at the time. So basically, here's just like an example to give you an idea. There was a countess whose English friends were shocked to find out that her apartment was just 1 floor above a fishmonger. Literally,
Oh God,
the notes
don't let her parents find out.
the notes literally say gasp. Like, you literally nailed it. you right on cue,
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So in the narrow streets, which were called closes, lined with high built lodging, people would dump their chamber pots out of the window. This was just how you would dispose. There was no sewage, this is just, there's no draining. You just dump it out. So you can just imagine, I know we've talked about this, but like the smell and how
filth.
You must just get used to it. Like, how else would you function?
Yeah.
I wonder, yeah, I just can't imagine. I feel like that'd be so distracting if you time traveled and you were like, am I standing in
my
poop?
God.
You know?
Thank you for mentioning
I
time
didn't
travel.
even think about it until just now, but like that would be a really big hiccup. You'd have to train like NASA does with the gravity thing. You'd have to train the sense.
No, that makes total sense. I mean, if you got out of your DeLorean and took one breath of
be vomiting.
oxygen, you'd go and like
And then
go
you'd
right
suddenly
back in the
everyone
car.
would be like, what's your deal? You know?
I'd be like, take me back. I don't care.
Take me back. It's not worth it. It's not worth it.
Like, and also like the biohazard. Like,
oh, good point. The illness. And yes, I mean, that's literally one of the next bullets is like, of course, then illness becomes a huge issue. Disease spreading. I mean, ooh, it just makes your skin
like,
crawl.
and also this is like such like a very niche thing, but like imagine having little kids and they're just like running out to the balcony, putting their hands on the balcony covered in someone else's suit. Like
they're like going to play and you're like, well, they're coming back like, in poop.
And then they do the thing and then they like wipe their hands. And it's like, yeah, everyone just eating everyone's matter. Ugh.
Oh, I'm gonna be
sorry.
No, I mean,
so sorry.
Don't be sorry. It's what happened. It's disturbing. Oh boy. Okay, so of course, literally next bullet, the usual problems of overcrowding, noise, pollution, and disease. So in the late 1700s, construction started on what was called Newtown, Edinburgh, where the wealthy could thankfully escape all of the lowbrow folks that they were
with all the woes they have.
All their many woes. Imagine like they had to dump their chamber pot right where someone else who was poor was dumping their chamber pot. How embarrassing.
Like, that should like be the most humbling experience like for anyone who thinks they're a diva. It's like you're still pouring your poop out.
I mean,
like everyone else.
The literal phrase, like your shit still stinks. Like this is literally
like, you're not
that.
Special, Glorg Karen.
Glorg Karen 3000. Give it a rest, okay? Dump your chamber pot where everybody else does. So by the 1800s now, we have essentially two cities like distinct from one another. There's Old Town Edinburgh and Newtown. And in 1818, the first steam ferry began operating between Belfast and Glasgow. And there was this major boom in Irish emigration into Scotland. So by 1822, which was only 4 years later, the Union Canal linked Edinburgh and Glasgow. And now there's this like big influx of workers from Ireland. So Old Town keeps growing and Newtown keeps like trying to run away from Old Town, like expanding in the other direction because they're like, no, they're coming closer with their poop, you know.
I like to imagine it's like one of the like those like a Disney like animated maps where like you could see like the line drawing behind somebody of
like, as they're like zooming around.
yeah,
that's what it was. Basically they're like trying to escape. But both of their shit still stank, okay? And they both had another similar problem, which was that both of their cemeteries were way overcrowded. Oof. So Edinburgh had buried its dead in a place called, I think you've talked about Greyfriars Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you like about how haunted it is. And like there's that guy that scratches people and stuff. I feel like we've talked about this, I think recently. And I don't know if it was on here or on Rituals.
It was here, my friend. It was episode 214, actually. No, wait, that's not right. Oh. It was 306.
So like really recently, yeah. I was like, we've just talked about this. So this was the place to go once you've died. It was opened in 1562, and by the end of the 18th century, nearly 1,200 people a year were laid to rest there. Em did a wonderful job covering this. Go back to episode 302, you said?
306.
306? You can do 302 too, but I don't know what we talked about there. It's probably something stupid. So in times of plague and other disease, as you can imagine, there were just like these mass graves that were having to be dug in the kirk because it wasn't just the usual average amount of bodies. It was like, we need room for, a whole mass of them. And for families who couldn't afford to inter their loved ones in fancy mausoleums, the only option was burying them in a spot that might already be taken by someone else. Yikes. Mm-hmm. So in 1779, Scottish Enlightenment advocate Hugo Arnaud wrote the following. The graves are so crowded on one another that the sextons frequently cannot avoid in opening a ripe grave. Oof. Encroaching on one not fit to be touched! ! The whole presents a scene equally nauseous and unwholesome. Yeah. You
When
said it,
did
buddy.
when did news reporters stop using exclamation points?
You know, that's what I'm thinking because I'm reading this quote and it's like with an exclamation. I'm like, I feel that's powerful back then to be
You
using
know,
exclamation points.
I know the timelines don't totally add up, but whenever I see a news article with an exclamation point, I consider that consider that a welcoming or an invitation to read the headline in the transatlantic accent.
I was going to say in the accent, the read all about it. Yes,
Yeah.
precisely. I feel like they kind of merge those two.
But I've never seen anything in our time where they're like, I mean, think
Unless you're
everything that
quoting
Donald Trump has
somebody.
put us through recently, like
Yeah,
not a single headline had an exclamation
like
point.
multiple exclamation points, you'd think.
Just like a question mark, like ampersand, asterisk, like all the symbols,
Just,
just,
like,
to be like, what is going on?
We're all thinking it, right? What the fuck? Yeah, it is shocking because, like, if any time deserved it, you'd
It's
think.
now.
Yeah, you'd really think. But apparently not. Apparently we left it behind, unfortunately. Let's bring it back. I think it's fun.
Sure.
So even as more kirks or like graveyards were opening, the crowding was still an issue. And of course, there were always, where there's a problem, there are always some entrepreneurial folks trying to make a quick profit. So this is what happened. Advancements in medical science were a major part of the Scottish Enlightenment, and Edinburgh University was noted for its cutting edge, wink wink, anatomy department. Fun fact, Charles Darwin once studied there, so that should talk about like an alumni brag, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Can you imagine just being like, like Darwin
my college had Judge Judy, and I brag about that all the time. But like Charles Darwin, I don't know.
It's another one of those things that like people in the States will just never understand. It's like, oh, I go to the same school as like fucking Copernicus. I don't know.
No, literally, like my brain can't compute. I'm like, wait, they invented math here? How is that even possible? It just doesn't compute, literally. So, you know, I think probably we see where this is going. The anatomy students needed cadavers, aka recently deceased bodies, because they needed to dissect and study them. And this was not a time where you could really donate your body to science. And even if this were possible, people were very, very, I almost said into, that's probably not the right wording, but it was really important to people to have religious burials, you know, which understandably, you know, if you have a belief system and you're like, well, you know, this is really important that I'm laid to rest in a certain way. And so just donating your body to science was not really a thing back then.
Sure.
And this is where our folks come into play. They were called resurrection men, more commonly called body snatchers or grave robbers. I like to think resurrection men was like their rebrand. They were like, let's just our PR folks say this will be like just, I don't know, taken better by the public. It's just a little more palatable. Resurrection men.
The resurrection men! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Read all about
it. Jazz hands. So doctors and anatomy students would pay also really well for fresh bodies, which sounds so gross, but for fresh bodies to be used as cadavers. But selling the dead, as you can probably guess, was illegal at this time. So even if someone wanted to make a quick buck when their loved one died, like even if my partner or my grandmother died and I was like, I know what I'll do, I'll sell this body, you couldn't do it legally. Even if you were next of kin, so to speak. So what resurrection men would do is they would spend their days spying on funerals, what a dark hobby, and scoping out the newest burials. And then at night, they would just return to the scene and take the body out of the grave. Now, I know we've talked about this, and I think in your episode recently, that the problem got so bad that wealthy people would sometimes put these enormous iron cages around the casket, and they were called mort safes. And they would even hire, if they had the money, they would hire guards to stand watch for several days until the body, gross, was no longer presumably usable by
wanted
by anatomy students or doctors. So of course, privilege is I tragically assume always will be an issue, because graves of the poor were the easiest and most common targets because they didn't have hired guards and, you know, 24/7 watch and iron cages around their caskets. So, especially if you're thinking like working class, if it was up to the family to guard the grave themselves, they're laborers. They have to go to work. Like, you can't
Yeah.
just stand there and guard your loved one's body all day. So, author Elena Knight says that because the resurrection men were funded by educated young men from well off families, who are studying medicine, grave robbing was effectively endorsed by the establishment, which I think is so interesting because it's like such an underground, like seedy occupation, or if you can call it an occupation, but like seedy crime. But then to think like, but it was being funded, and endorsed by like the people up top who were like had their hands clean. I mean, not literally because they were cutting open bodies, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this just became a regular part of life in Edinburgh. It was another thing people just had to deal with. And this is when our pals, Burke and Hare, come into play. Their names, of course, now that I'm thinking about it, of course, this makes sense. Their names were William Burke and William Hare, a.k.a., I assume, Billy Burke, Billy Bunny.
Oh, that's
really
fun. I like to think that's how they, again, I'm only thinking in the transatlantic accent, which is like they're literally not at all, like they're from Edinburgh. Like,
yeah, not even, like, talk about an accent that's pretty distinct. So, yeah.
Yeah. Billy Burke and Billy Hare are still, those are they sound like they could be like
the two Billies, like, come on, it really works.
They sound like they could be some sort of like ragtag team of criminals.
And they were, they like actually were. So it really worked. And I'm sorry, they actually were Irish, but that's also a distinct accent. So they arrived in Scotland during the 1818 rush, and they ended up in Edinburgh, living in the challenging conditions of Old Town. I think it's kind of fun. I'll get to it, but like they're very different, but they like kind of become best friends, which is kind of fun. Before all the horrible
stuff. Like the Fox and the Hound.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Please don't bring. I thought I've told you not to bring that up in front of me.
I'm so sorry.
My emotional bandwidth can I handle today? So William Hare was a navvy, so Navvy, which is a laborer who worked on civil engineering projects. And he had recently finished up work on the Union Canal and moved into a lodging house on Tanner's Close, which was named for the nearby leather tanneries. This is like just a little glimpse into how living conditions were. There were 8 beds, and they slept 3 people each.
Oh my God.
Like, you didn't even get your own bed. And
that's like Willy Wonka's grandparents. Or
yes, whatever. But like +1, if they were having a threesome, I mean, it's just a lot. And especially if they're not like your friends or family necessarily. They're just like randos. So you're like sharing your bed with 2 randos. It's just a lot. So Hare was staying here, and he had his eyes on the lodger's wife, Maggie Laird, who had worked as a navvy alongside men and was described as a hard-faced and debauched virago.
And he said, that's the one.
And he said, that's my gal, in that transatlantic accent.
With an exclamation point.
With an exclamation point. And I didn't know what a virago was.
Okay.
Do you know that? Okay, so I looked it up, and like the definition currently from the Oxford Dictionary is a domineering, violent, or bad-tempered woman.
He really had a very specific type then.
He clearly did, and he knew it.
Yeah, he likes a challenge, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. Especially since she's already married,
Yeah. Great point.
What the fuck are you thinking? But it says archaic. I don't know how old school archaic is in this context, but maybe this is more what it meant. But the archaic definition is a woman of masculine strength or spirit, a female warrior. Which
he likes a strong girl.
Yeah, especially considering she worked alongside men doing like labor, like physical labor, which, is, I feel like, pretty unheard of back then. So the lodger, her husband, died. And so Hare took over the tenement and the marriage. He was like, here's my shot.
He just snuck right in.
He didn't even need to ask. He's just like, I'm here. And she was like, okay. And so now he was officially the landlord and the common law spouse of Maggie.
Okay.
So William Burke, the other Billy, I'm sorry, not the other Billy, the other Burke. Wait, no.
Oh my God, the other Billy.
What's wrong with me? I'm sorry. That I got all in my head. The other Billy, William Burke, was a navvy as well, like a laborer, who worked on the same canal as Hare. And he was born in Northern Ireland, and he was relatively well educated for the time. He had served in the army. He also had a wife named Maggie. Like, they're very similar, these two, in some ways, and very different in others. He had a wife named Maggie and 2 children, whom he abandoned to emigrate to Scotland. And this is where he met a new woman. Her name was Helen, or Nellie McDougall. And she abandoned her 2 children to go live with Burke. So he found his type as well, like willing to leave your family behind.
If they can find them, we can find them, folks.
That's right. Just believe. This is like, it should be uplifting in that way. Yes. Your person is out there.
Yeah.
So eventually, through mutual acquaintances, Burke moved into a spare room in the tenement that Hare was now running, and he began working there as a cobbler. Hare was remembered as a quarrelsome man with a temper, and Burke was described as a merry fellow who liked to dance. And so, despite having these very opposing personality traits, they became BFFs, best friends. Mm-hmm. In 1827, one of Hare's lodgers, who was an elderly man named Donald, died unexpectedly of something called dropsy.
Okay.
Have you heard of this?
It sounds like what's happening to me these days with my fainting spells.
I mean, it might be. I'm not going to lie. I don't know too much about it, but it's basically an old-timey name for swelling, which is usually linked to heart, liver, or kidney failure.
Oh.
So Donald had died suddenly, but he owed Hare money for rent, for lodging. So Hare thought, oh, I know, we'll just sell his body, and that'll cover what he owed us.
Okay.
So he convinced Burke, who's now living there, to help him out, and he would get a cut of the profit. So they staged a burial with a casket full of bark. Like, they went all the way with this. And they pretended to bury him, and then they actually walked to the college and asked a random student if they could speak to a doctor. And from there, they got sent to Dr. Robert Knox at number 10 Surgeon Square. And that is where they met with 3 students who were like, oh, cool. Yep. Bring the body tonight. Come on over tonight with the body. So Burke and Hare literally just like took the body that night, delivered it to the lecture hall in a sack that night.
Oh, God. Wow.
So dark.
Sack.
So dark. It's sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't really care what happens to my body after I die. But then I hear this and I'm like, but like, maybe don't throw me in a sack and just like,
I don't know what the line is where I start caring,
Yeah.
but sack is definitely under the line.
Sack is past the line. Don't go there. Yeah, sack is you've gone too far, you know? So they put him in a sack, bring him to the hospital or the school, and the students and Dr. Knox pay them £7, 10 shillings. Now, in today's money, that would be £430 or $517 US.
Not worth it, my friend. Not worth it to me.
$500. I'm sorry. Maybe if I were like really in dire straits, but this is a stretch.
Yeah.
For an idea though, because I think in this scenario, like relatively, it was worth it for them, because just for an idea of like what the buying power of this was, tenants were paying around 87 cents a night.
Oh.
So
okay.
if you think about it, like,
wow,
£7 was like a lot. Like if, compared to 87 cents. So
it was like essentially like £6 a week, and they were making $4.80.
Yeah.
So I can't do the math right now, but that feels like eight months of rent or eight.
Well, so they were making £7, 10 shillings at the time, and the rent was 87 cents at the time. So today it would be £430. I don't know let me see what 87 cents was. Basically, oh God, my brain can't compute.
I also think it's because we're going from cents to pounds, and my brain's
it's
also
very confusing.
Also, I did only have like a half an hour of sleep because I was a star tender all night.
Well, you were working. You were working all night.
I was doing my night shift.
You were moonlighting, literally, probably on the moon. I don't know if anyone's ever done that before, but it's pretty impressive.
Usually, my math I can trust, but not today.
I'm gonna do 1827, 87 cents to today, and see what it says. Okay, so people were paying about, okay, $15 a night to stay here.
Okay.
And they had just made like 430.
Dope.
If
I
that
get
ma-
it.
Yeah. So it's quite a bit of buying power. Like if you don't have expendable income and you live off of people paying rent, and all of a sudden you get this like influx of, as if you had several more tenants
Yeah.
and several
Yeah.
more weeks of rent. So basically it was a good amount of money. And the students, as Burke and Hare were leaving, said, "We look forward to working with you again." And they were hooked. So Burke and Hare were like, "We want to keep doing this. However, we don't think we're cut out to be resurrection men." And I like that they were self-aware enough to know, like, the labor, like, it was hard work locating these graves, digging them up, running from the guards, like carrying a body across the city, bribing people they might run into.
It's a multitask job.
It is, and it's a very messy and a little risky. So instead, they came up with their own solution. They decided they would just wait for one of the tenants to get sick again.
Oh, good.
Yeah, sure. Another dropsy situation, So in February of 1828, an elderly man named Joseph was sick with a fever. It could have been cholera or really any of the other diseases that was common at the time. And they knew he wouldn't survive. So they basically gave him whiskey until he drank himself to sleep. And then they smothered him with a pillow.
Oh my God.
So
okay,
they were
so they
like,
didn't wait too long.
yeah, they were like, "We know he's going to die," which makes me think, like, then can't you just wait?
Yeah, so now they're committing murder, which is definitely not worth the $400.
No. They like jumped straight to murder. They were like, "Okay, we'll take this body in, fake a funeral." That's one thing. But then now they're like killing people.
They thought that was real easy. So I guess it wasn't that far of a leap for them of like, let's just end the body we plan on burying.
Yeah, it's
and
almost
then taking
exactly. It's almost like a classic, like, you just like give an inch, take a mile. Like they were like, "Well, he's already gonna die." And then it, like, I mean, spoiler alert, it escalates to where they're like, "Well, we can make him sick." You know what I mean? Like it just becomes really problematic. But yeah, you can see the step of like, well, he is gonna die. So like ethically, it's not that big of a deal if we smother him with a pillow, right? Beg to differ, but again, they were BFFs. They saw life the same way. They went for it. Now, this time, they got an increased pay because it was winter. And Dr. Knox's students paid them £10 this time.
You would think it would be less
that's
when
what
it's
I
winter.
thought.
Because
that's what I thought.
Because the body's frozen and is staying, it's, quote, usable for longer without you having done anything.
But I think, so I took a minute to wrap my head around that as well, because you're right. That is why they were more valuable, because the cold preserved them better. But that being said, that means that the bodies being delivered were automatically at like a better starting point. So it was like, oh, you've brought whatever
like
the
you
circumstances.
Brought a top dollar
exactly.
item.
So
Okay.
you just, no matter what the environmental reasons or the surrounding context was, if you were able to bring a quote unquote fresher body, you were just going to be paid more. So the winter rate is higher because typically the bodies were more.
I guess that makes sense because in the summer they're probably getting
like less
preserved
so sick.
faster, and so no matter what, the quality is not very good.
Yeah, it's hard to like get that kind of, oh, it's so gross to think about and say in these terms, but I mean that is exactly the logic there. So they were like, hell yeah, we're getting even more money in the winter, and that wasn't so bad. So soon one of Hare's new tenants came down with jaundice, and they were like, well, we don't know if he's gonna die, but like he might, so let's kill him. So they gave him whiskey, smothered him, and collected a quick £10 from Dr. Knox. And you can see how this is now becoming like out of control. Like they're like, this is so easy. Let's just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. So their next victim was an elderly woman named Abigail Simpson. She lived off of a retirement pension of what would now be $5 a week. And she sold, yeah, really bad. And she sold salt on the side to get by. So she was really,
hurting.
hurting financially.
Yeah.
So on February 11th, 1828, Burke saw her selling salt in the street and invited her back to Tanner's Close, where he got her drunk on whiskey. She told him she had a daughter, and Hare said he would marry her daughter and care for them both, like take them under his wing, which is now getting really sick and manipulative. Like, this is becoming just like pure serial killer behavior.
Yeah.
But in the morning, the men gave her more whiskey and smothered her. They made another 10 pounds, which was, this is sick, more than 10 times the weekly pension Abigail was living on. So so it's like, that's her worth after she was killed. It's just disturbing.
Wow.
On April 12th, it had been 2 months since Burke and Hare's last paycheck. God forbid. I don't know what they're spending it on if they're suddenly like have this influx of cash and now they're already out. Like, what are you buying? Pillows?
Flat
some other
screens?
people? Flat screens? Yeah, I don't know. So maybe the newest top-notch chamber pot, you know,
That
with a
could
little,
be
like some
it.
herbs to make it smell a little less bad.
I hope so. Whatever their version was, it poopery, like literal poopery.
Oh no. They could have used that back then. So they were getting desperate for more money. Burke was drinking in a local, now I feel like we're getting back to your bartending, a local grog shop.
No.
A grog shop, literally.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it sounds like also my basement. Like, I feel like it's a really good combo. Let's call it the grog shop, my basement. Like, really fits, right?
The troll hole in the grog shop.
Oh my god.
Stop
Troll
it.
at the grog shop. But I'm gonna put a PE at the end of shop. The
You
grog
have
shop.
to.
Yeah,
You have
gotta
to.
do it. Also, I don't want this grog shop from the 1800s to sue me. You know, I doubt they're still in business. But
just think you're gonna get away with it.
You think?
I just have a hunch. Yeah.
Okay, well, I trust your hunch. So, the grog shop, and he's there drinking when two 18-year-olds entered, both girls, Janet Brown and Mary Patterson. The girls were sex workers. They were, I guess I should say, young women. They were 18. They were sex workers, and they were well known by everyone in the area. This is kind of a like backhanded thing because it says Mary was regarded as a great beauty. And Janet was Janet was also there. It's like,
I feel like there's probably some article that's come out about the two of us, and it said something like that. Christine's hysterical.
No, I know what it is.
Has ADHD.
Em is also there. Yeah. No, but I know what it is. It's it's your favorite photo that Funny or Die posted where I'm Mike Wazowski and they put the logo right over my face and you're in it. And I had the same reaction from Monsters Inc. that Mike Wazowski had where I was like, where everyone looked at me nervously and I went, I'm on Funny or Die. Like, I was just so excited that I was, it didn't faze me. And then you were like, Christine, they literally put an entire logo over your face. And I was like, oh, I don't even care.
It's also just like Mike Wazowski because only one eyeball is kind of showing.
That is like you share that like every 6 months. And every time I'm like, oh, Lord.
I can't wait to post it later today.
You gotta.
Just a reminder.
You know what we should do also is have Megan post it at like when this episode comes out, just so people can really get an idea. Because I feel like I'm Janet. You know, like Em was regarded as a great comedian. Full stop. Anyway, the two of them came in. It's like, oh, ow. It's a little bit.
You really were just so excited to be on Funny or Die.
I literally was Mike Wazowski. I was like, oh, everyone looked at me nervously and I was like, I'm on Funny or Die. And everyone was like, does she not see it? Like, does she not notice? Oh man. Oh, it's beautiful times. So that's what made me that's what it made me think of. It's like you look so good in that photo, and it's like I did before they covered it up, but I'm like under there somewhere. I just love that whoever made that just didn't give a shit enough. I don't blame them, but like didn't give a shit enough to like take a second glance and be like, one of the people
they had to have, and then just like kind of like side eye, like click publish. And
they were like, we don't care, right? Like it's fine. And to be honest, like I don't care, so you're good, but. I just imagine with someone more diva or high maintenance who was like, what the fuck?
I feel like if you're gonna be like, I mean, and I know it doesn't sound like it because the roles are not reversed, but if it were, I think I'd have the same attitude as you. Because if you're gonna be like welcomed into Funny or Die, like you have to expect someone there is like funny.
And like, to be
You know?
honest, we have propagated that photo so much that it's like they did the trick. Like, we promote that article all the time because we're
Yeah.
like, this is the funniest picture.
Lovely. It was so funny.
So whether or not they knew what they were doing, they nailed it.
If Funny or Die ever takes us back, I'm gonna beg to switch spots with you and have like the logo on my face.
I'm gonna just ask Maggie, our manager, like, can you just put a word in, like maybe flip it, like we'll reverse the picture, just keep the logo in the same spot. Yeah. But you're so tall, you'll probably just be at the top of it. Like, you'll just probably find your way, you'll still be there. Oh, Lord.
What were we talking about?
So I was talking about how Mary was known as a great beauty and Janet was also there. So the two of them walked into the grog shop, as you do. And like I said, they were well-known sex workers in the area. So Burke said hello to them, ended up buying them drinks, and then he invited them back to his place. So nothing unusual, in the context here. Burke was making them promises, like these just big, bold promises. He said, oh, I'm going to provide you with a lifelong pension so you never have to worry about money again. And Janet was the brains of the operation because pretty quickly she was
like it.
This sounds like a bad idea. But Mary convinced her to go along with it. So she and Mary went back to Burke's house, and the three of them shared 2 bottles of whiskey, which
God.
I know they're Irish and Scottish, relatively speaking, but
damn,
it's still a lot to me, a lot of whiskey, and I'm a drinker,
I'm not, and I know that's a lot.
It's a lot, yeah. So Burke's sister-in-law, Elizabeth, left and told Burke's wife that Burke was out and about with 2 young women, and especially if she knew locally that they were 2 sex workers, and one of them was beautiful. That was a dig. That was a mean dig. I'm just kidding.
And the other one had a brain.
The other one was smart, which not really relevant back then, but So of course, his wife shows up in a frenzy, and it turns into this big fight. Burke threw a glass at her, kicked her out of the room, and locked the door. What a winner. Mary Patterson was so drunk on whiskey that she slept through everything with her head on the table. Like, she had passed out by now, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I would have as well. She passed out and had her head on the table where they'd been drinking. And so through this whole fight and throwing glass and, screaming fit, she just slept right through it, snored her way through it. But Janet made her getaway, and terrified of Burke's wife, because Burke's wife was like after her now for being involved with her husband. So Hare showed up now, summoned by Elizabeth after she'd sent.
I'm sorry. It sounded like when the Macbeth's tights. You said finally Hare showed up. Just imagine like a wig dancing on.
So finally, the actor portraying Mary's beautiful, luscious locks, which were a big part of her, beautiful persona, showed up.
It just felt like, what's that, like Fantasia, like broomsticks and whatever.
No.
It just sounded like
You've literally brought up 2 of the most traumatic movies of my life, Fox and the Hound and Fantasia. Thank you for doing that.
Just free thinking hair just kind of floated.
It just showed up. All of a sudden, everybody had a beautiful do.
Yeah. Sorry.
So Hare showed up. He had been summoned by Elizabeth after she'd sent for Burke's wife. And Elizabeth was also back now, along with Hare's wife, Maggie. So now they're all just like, what is going on here? We've all gathered. We know you're up to no good. So William Hare told all 3 women, Elizabeth, Helen, and Maggie, to wait outside. And he went inside and helped Burke smother the unconscious Mary Patterson.
Oh.
So now he's like, just wait out here a minute. I've just got some loose ends to tie up. And he goes inside and murders her. And this would now be their 4th victim. And I mean, you know what? good for Janet. I know she wasn't the beauty, but apparently she really was able to make her way out of there. She had a gut feeling, followed it, left. So good for her.
Good for her.
It's obviously extremely tragic for Mary. She was their fourth victim, and once they had killed her, they hid her on the bed under the bed linens. Doesn't seem like a very great place to hide someone. Especially if your wife is like thinking you're sleeping with someone. That's probably the first place she's going to check, but
Yeah.
what do I know? So while Burke walked to Surgeon Square to arrange the sale, Janet showed up again, and this time she had a servant girl who worked for Mrs. Laurie, who was a local landlady and brothel keeper, and Janet had basically gone back to the brothel and said, hey, I left Mary behind, but there was some and because she was passed out, but there was some crazy shit happening. We got to go check on this. So Mrs. Laurie and a servant girl showed up, and they had been sent to get Mary out of this situation. Obviously not knowing she was killed. She had been killed. So Hare told her that Mary had left on a walk with Burke. Don't check the bedroom. She's not there. She's out on a walk. Don't worry about it.
Whatever you do not open the store.
For no reason whatsoever. So he sent the servant girl away and invited Janet in for drinks while they waited for Mary to return. I assume, I don't have these details, but I imagine he was like, I'm so sorry about that debacle. Things got heated, but I want to assure you everything's fine. Mary's, all better. Out for a walk, getting some fresh air. She'll be back and you can take her home. Yeah. So that's just kind of what I assume happened, because she felt comfortable enough to stay. She sat at a table with Burke, Hare, Elizabeth, Maggie, and Helen. Elizabeth was a sister-in-law. And they sat around drinking whiskey. This whole time, she had no idea that only a few feet away under some blankets was the body of her friend. And she had no idea that presumably she would be the next victim, right? And I'm assuming this is where they're going with this plan, Burke and Hare. Mm-hmm. But thank God the servant girl returned again, which I love that she'd been sent away as a servant girl. And then she came back like, no, I didn't like the vibe of this. I'm checking on you.
Yeah, good for her.
Which I love. So she kind of overstepped in a good way. And she returned and she insisted that Janet leave with her to Mrs. Laurie's. And I'm sure Burke and Hare were like, no, we're having a good time. Stay, have another drink. They're plying her with whiskey. Yeah. But Janet, again, is like, there's something wrong here. And so she leaves with the servant. And
I love Janet.
Love it. Like, she's really nailing it. And, I'm not saying anything against Mary, because obviously this was not her fault by any means, but it's just like, wow, what a scary situation to be in as Janet, and having to figure out like, okay, my friend's not here.
Yeah.
Should I wait for her, or am I now in danger? So I love that she made the right move. So Burke and Hare, yikes, carried Mary's body across town in broad daylight this time.
Oh my God.
And
wow, just shameless.
Just shameless. They had her body stored in a chest. So this is pretty wild. Some schoolboys circled around and began to taunt them, shouting, "They're carrying a corpse." It's like, did they know that, or were they just joking?
And also, like, how wild was the time? It was
right?
Like that era for kids to just like think that was like a normal
to be
joke
like, I know what you've got, and it's like,
yeah,
wow, how twisted and dark. Like,
it's like they were just so used to body snatchers around them that it was just a normal thing to poke fun at.
Yeah, they're like, we see through your little ruse. We know there's a body in there, but we won't.
I can also see like a dad with like bad jokes today, seeing people move out of an apartment and being like, "You got a body in there,"
and then it's like, actually, there is. In the freezer. Like, yeah. Mm-hmm. And you're like, fuck, they're on to me. Yeah. So yeah, they were like taunting them, saying, oh, they're carrying a corpse. And then they ran off. So far, Burke and Hare had murdered 2 old men with no family and 1 old woman whose daughter would have no idea where to even begin looking. And this time they had some trouble, because guess who is still looking for Mary?
Janet.
fucking Janet. She's on the case.
Sure, Jan.
Sure, Jan. She is on it, okay? She is a girl boss. It hurts my soul to even say that. And I don't want to ascribe that to her because, like, no. But she really was. She was a badass. She's searching for her friend Mary, and she has not given up yet. She doesn't give up easy. So in the medical school, one of Dr. Knox's students recognized Mary, which makes me think like, you recognize the local sex worker.
Yeah.
I wonder where you cross paths. I'm sure it was just at a cocktail party, right? Like no other.
Yeah, what were your big bucks being spent?
Yeah, weird. I don't know. I don't know how he just happened to recognize her. But he asked, like, how did you obtain her body? Like, what happened? And Burke and Hare first said they bought her body off a woman who said Mary died of alcohol poisoning. But they did not plan very well for this because when asked again, they said they bought her off of Mary's family. Then they said if anyone asked any more questions, they would stop delivering bodies. Red flag.
To be fair, they're also, I think, hammered right now. So, like, they probably are not making a lot of sense. Interesting how they're trying to blame alcohol poisoning on her when they're also smashed. And, like, that guy could probably smell it on their breaths. And he's like, oh, yeah, sure. She had alcohol poisoning.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Takes one to know one.
What a bad crime, because couldn't he just eventually put it together that, like, oh, when I open her up, I will realize that she died from alcohol poisoning, or there was a lot of alcohol in her system, and you reek of alcohol.
Yeah.
Like, sounds like the two of you were together when she died.
Although I feel like that's not solid evidence. You could be like, we were both just drunk that night.
I guess, but I feel like it would still open up a hunch.
It's an alarm bell, but hey, I don't think they care enough.
That's a good point.
And
I don't
like
think they care.
We've talked about this really recently, like I think last week, that she was a sex worker. It wasn't necessarily the priority to figure out from higher up folks. Was not necessarily the priority to get justice for her. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So just as like a perfect example of how this went down, Burke and Hare told this Dr. Knox, if you ask any more questions, we won't deliver any more bodies. And so they said, understood, we won't ask any more questions. They cared that little about like
0%.
0% about like what actually happened. They were like, our priority is getting these bodies. So if questioning you is going to make you uncomfortable and stop, we'll stop questioning you. And honestly, they probably phrased it to themselves as like, well, if we don't know what happened to the body, we can't be responsible. Like, if they found out, oh, this woman has been murdered, the doctor, he probably has to say something or feels obligated to. But if he's like, I'll just plug my ears, you bring the bodies, I won't ask questions, I feel like it's just easier for them to kind of swallow that
I think so too.
Of how this relationship will go. So, tragically, this is so fucking gross. This is so fucking gross on so many levels. Tragically, because Mary was, as we said, so beautiful. Instead of, I know, it's bad. Instead of dissecting her, because God forbid we cut into a beautiful woman, Dr. Knox kept her preserved in alcohol for 3 months. To use in lectures about muscular anatomy.
She only used in lectures?
Yeah.
Are we sure it wasn't for anything else?
I think once she's... I'm not sure of anything at this point, but like to show like a perfect specimen. Do you know what I mean? Like, ugh.
I get it. I have also been on morgue TikTok recently, and apparently it is very common and understood in the community that a lot of morticians are women for a reason.
Yeah, I think there was an episode of like, God, there was a podcast episode about that.
Yeah.
I gotta find the podcast. It's alarming.
Because men can't be fucking trusted with even dead bodies. And it is apparently decades, if not centuries long, understood thing in that world.
It's kind of been like a low key, like, understanding in some circles, which is so disturbing.
Even when you're dead, you're not fucking safe, everyone. No. It's awful.
Again, and we talked about this too. Like, again, last week in my story about Khalil Wheeler Weaver, which is even beyond death. I think you said it, even beyond death, like your privilege is still like a factor. So if you are, you know, a group that's discriminated against, like you're still not totally safe after death. Like if you're impoverished, your family's impoverished, well, then your body will probably be snatched and cut up, despite how important it is to have a religious funeral for your family or burial for your family. It's like the privilege part just doesn't end.
I mean, hello, like you said it earlier, like rich people could pay for guards.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're poor, you really don't stand a chance, and like this is your fate even after death, which is like ugh.
And even like I'm sure she would have loved to be known that like even in death she was so beautiful, she was on display. No, she wouldn't want to fucking know that. She'd be like, "Can I please be put in the ground and like put to rest, please?"
And can somebody like figure out that I was smothered to death? Like somebody
and
murdered
everyone's
me.
ignoring that. Like, thanks so much for caring because I'm beautiful, but not caring enough to like report
that I'm a person.
Murder. Yeah,
right. It's so twisted. So of course, Mary Patterson would become the most notorious of Burke and Hare's victims. I think it's because at this point she was youthful, she was beautiful, she was well known in town. It wasn't like they had found another drifter or another person who didn't have anybody who knew who they were. Like, you know, they were targeting isolated folks who were oftentimes elderly and were sick themselves, and now they had kind of stepped into a new territory. And so she kind of became their most notorious victim. So fast forward to May, and Burke and Hare kill an elderly woman lodging at Hare's for the night. And this time they are no longer using a pillow. So what they're doing now is that once their victim was nearly unconscious with whiskey, one of the men, oh God, I just hate, this just disturbs me. It gives me the heebie-jeebies. One of the men laid across their body to hold them still, while the other covered their mouth and nose with their hands.
Oh my God.
Which is like, to me, so deeply unsettling, because it's like, you know, even though you're unconscious, your body is like
gonna fighting
that, you know, to stay alive, which is just so sick. Really fucked. Next was a middle-aged woman named Mary Haldane. She was a sex worker with 2 children who was lodging at Hare's temporarily. The children were staying elsewhere. So when one of her daughters, Peggy Haldane, came looking for her, the men offered her a drink to comfort her about her missing mom. Then they murdered her too, because she was there. They were like, well, you've arrived, so we might as well take advantage of you as well, especially since your mom's dead, and if you find that out, then we're in trouble. So we might as well take the next witness off the earth.
Oh my God.
So after that, they murdered an old woman named Effie, who sometimes sold Burke scraps of leather she found in the trash so that he could use these pieces in his cobbling business. So Burke saw a policewoman bringing a drunk woman in for disturbing the peace, and Burke, oh my God, pretended to be outraged at the way the policeman was handling her. And he said, you know, step aside, I'll take her home myself and give her the respect she deserves. God. So the police officer, bad move, just handed this woman over to a random man in the street who promised to take care of her. And he brought her home and murdered her like the others.
Oh my God.
In June, it just keeps going. It's like one of those stories that I tell where I'm like, do I pause? Do I just barrel through?
Just rattle them off. Yeah.
Whew. In June, an old Irish woman approached Burke in the street, and she had come from Glasgow with her 12-year-old grandson to stay with friends, and she was lost and just looking for directions. So innocent of a start, but she had no idea who she was approaching. So Burke invited her back. He said, why don't you come back to my lodging? You know, you'll be safe there. We'll figure out where you need to go. Can have a drink. Well, she followed him back to the lodging house and was immediately murdered. Then they considered what to do with the 12-year-old grandson that she had come with. He had a disability where he could not speak. So one of the
God.
Yeah.
Sorry, it just means that he can't either cry for help or tell what he saw.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So they one of the men's wives suggested they put him out to wander.
Oh my God.
Just like let him go. But the men were worried he would, despite not speaking, would lead people back to the lodging.
Uh-huh.
So they
Right.
murdered him as well.
Of course.
So now they're murdering children.
Yep.
At some point, Hare and his wife Maggie tried to convince Burke to let them murder his wife, Helen, simply because they didn't like her.
Oh.
And Burke was like, well, fuck no. That's my wife. No.
Finally, he has a standard.
Seriously?
Just one.
Yeah.
Just one.
Oh my God. So he had abandoned his first wife, didn't care about that. But this one's special.
Can you imagine how bold you have to be as the friend to be like, how about your wife next?
Yeah, you're talking to your wife. You're like, but how do we
Jeez.
approach it? Like, what if he gets mad at us? Like, what do we say?
Imagine you come home from work later and you're like, you're not going to believe what fucking Billy said today at work. Also, you should look out.
And you know his wife's in on it because she hates you.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, Hare supplied a body to Dr. Knox in secret without Burke's help. So now he's kind of going behind his partner's back and finding bodies and making the full profit so he doesn't have to split it. So they get into this big fight over it. And Burke and Helen decide to move out, but not very far. Next, Anne McDougal came to visit, and she was Helen's ex-husband's cousin. I know it's a lot. So I won't even worry about it. But Burke considered her a distant friend and felt guilty about hurting her. So he had Hare murder her instead.
Oh, great.
So the guilt
Because he
only
felt guilty.
went so far. Yeah. He's like,
Great.
I don't feel good about doing this. Can you do it? And he was like, sure, yeah. So this actually repaired their relationship. How beautiful.
Oh, thank God. I was wondering how they'd be stitched together again.
Yeah, who needs a counselor, you know? Like, they figured it out all on their own.
Yeah, they've got it covered. They don't need additional help.
Seriously. So a charwoman, who is somebody who cleans the house, like a housekeeper, named Mrs. Hostler became, now get this, I know we've been rattling off, but here's a number for you, their 14th victim.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we've gotten to 14 already. In October, Burke and Hare made their first major mistake since Mary Patterson, and that is when they targeted a local boy named James Wilson. And James had an very unkind local nickname. He was called Daft Jamie. He had a cognitive disability that made other people regard him as, quote, slow.
Okay.
Big
great.
yikes, especially nowadays. I mean, yes, different times, but like, let's all take a moment to think about how dark this is. He also had a physical disability that gave him a limp. So he even had a physical manifestation that people could, mock and point
So it feels
to.
like they're very much like it wasn't just a one-off. Like feels like they're targeting weaker children, quote weaker children.
Yeah, great point. Great point.
Like more vulnerable children, or I mean, this is obviously not how either of us feel, but I feel like at that time it's like, well, they're not as useful or something, or like they won't be as missed or something horrible.
Or like people already are cruel to him and don't like him. So
yeah, so we're putting him out of his misery. Or
yeah,
something.
or like,
God.
who's gonna care if they're just being cruel to him? Yeah, it's obviously gut churning. It is gut churning. Despite the nickname, oh, well, here you go. This is where the mistake comes in. He had a cruel nickname, but he was well loved.
Oh,
by all.
Thank God.
Yes, because he was very kind. So he hung out with the other boys, never caused trouble. So despite this kind of like nickname, which I feel like was more of just like in jest, but like a sick kind of jest that today would not fly. But they gave him like this nickname, but they still loved him and they kept him around. He was a very kind boy, never caused trouble. And Maggie lured him to their lodging where Burke and Hare murdered him. So again, they made this mistake that they made with Mary because they bring the body to Dr. Knox and he's like, this is Jamie. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know if he said this is Daft Jamie, but like, this is Jamie. I know him and he's a child. Like, what happened here?
And we're understanding at this point that like this guy knows what they're up to, right? Like
I think like they maybe had an inkling, or some of them, since it was a group. So there was like the doctor, there were the students. So I think my guess is that some of them had an inkling that like something not so above board was happening. But we're like, well, if we don't question it, we won't be, responsible. There's no ethical obligation or moral obligation on our part if we don't know the details.
I would just be
don't
curious.
Ask, don't tell.
I mean, I don't know how big this town is, but it would be curious to me why, like, it seems that every day someone is dead. Like, and it's like a lot of times so far, at least more than a usual amount, you're recognizing these people. Like, how are so many people in your circles just dying day after day?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And like, I know obviously Edinburgh was really big and overcrowded, but if you think like, obviously people ran in the similar circles and would go to the same pubs and would go to the same lodging houses. And so it does make some sense why they'd be like, but the dumb part too is like, at the beginning, you were targeting elderly people who were down and out, didn't like maybe had a sickness
nobody would have
already.
Noticed
people, they were estranged from their family. They didn't have friends, so that,
or if they pass, they're older and it can be like no one's going to raise any eyebrows to that as much as young children and women.
Exactly, especially if they had like an illness or something, so I feel like that was such a more, I hate to say logical, but in the context, like a much more logical way to go about this. But now they're like targeting children and it's like, well, of course that's going to raise an alarm immediately, especially if they're like well loved in the community. And so, all three of Dr. Knox's students recognized James immediately. And also, what a jarring moment when you're like, I'm just going to do my anatomy lab. And then you like pull the sheet back and you're like, oh my God, that's that child Jamie that we all love so much.
That we all know.
God, that must be really jarring. So Jamie was a friendly and familiar face to everybody nearby. But the rule was, and they're students, so they have to follow, the protocol. The rule was that they were not allowed to pester resurrection men with uncomfortable questions. So they let it go. Because again,
I can't believe that's actually a rule.
blissful ignorance, right? Like,
yeah.
If we don't know, there's nothing we can do about it. So one man claims that when Dr. Knox heard people were looking for James, he even sped up the dissection to cover their tracks.
Oh, wow. So he's like,
so now he's in on it, I think, is when he realizes like, okay, people are out looking for this kid. So it's not like, oh, he had a funeral and they took the body like they allegedly claimed to do. Now there's something much more nefarious going on. So October 31st, of course, Halloween, Burke met their 16th and final victim, Mary Docherty. She was a middle-aged Irish woman with no money who had traveled from Glasgow looking for her son, and she hadn't eaten at all that day. So Burke lied to her and said she had the same maiden name as his own mother and that they were from the same town back in Ireland. And he said, wow, this is incredible. Maybe we're distant relatives. And so he invited her back to his lodgings, and you got to imagine she's hungry. She's new to the area. This must be like, a comforting feeling. Somebody might know your family. You have this connection. So Mary Docherty visited with Burke, Hare, and all their friends during a Halloween party. Once everyone left, Burke and Hare killed Mary and hid her under some straw. So all through the next day, November 1st, people came and went while Mary's body just lay there under the straw. Twice, one of the other lodgers named Mrs. Gray got too close to the straw and Burke like freaked out. He was like, get away from that.
Yeah.
Weird red flag. Okay. Later, while the men were out trying to arrange selling Mary's body, Mrs. Gray crept back in. I fucking love Mrs. Gray. She's us. Gray.
She's like, I smell mischief. I need to know.
Something is up. And I'm going to pretend like I just followed the rules and walked away when he told me to. But the second he's out of sight, I got to go see what's in that straw. So she crept back in, see what was the matter with the straw, and she found, of course, Mary's body. And she and her husband are like, let's fucking pack our shit and go.
Yeah. Let's roll out. Time to go. Gotta blast.
This is like out of a horror movie because then Helen Burke walks in and says, oh, what's the hurry? Where are you going? You know, that moment.
On it. Yeah.
They're like, wait, what did you just sing?
It's like the background music to Get Out. Or is it Get Out or the other one that came out? It's like it's like notoriously like no, it's not. It's the tethered one.
Yeah.
It's like
Us.
Us. It's the like notoriously scary music now for like a general horror movie.
It is honestly so upsetting. I watched it on an airplane and I was like, this will not be scary on an airplane. Well, still was.
Are you kidding me, Christine?
Still was. So yeah, they basically, she shows up like, you know, it's like you're about to escape. And then she's like, what's the matter? You know, and it's like, oh God.
And she's like dragging the tip of a knife on a table or something. Yeah.
She's like, ugh. What could ever be the problem? Oh, it's just so chilling. And so they confronted her about the body, which I would have been like, oh, nothing. I just have a bad tummy ache and I'm going to go to the pharmacy.
Yeah.
Bye.
I'm not feeling good.
Yeah. Just let me go with my suitcase, please. And they confronted her about the body and she begged them not to turn her husband in. She said she was so ashamed of the murders, but, quote, my God, I cannot help it. Which is like, okay.
But also, like, these are, like, they're considered now loose ends. Like, even if they said, we promise, is she going to believe them?
That's exactly the fear is like, what do you say to... I don't think they should have brought it up at all, but, you know, too late.
Yeah.
So Mrs. Gray said, you surely can help it or you wouldn't stay in this house. Which, like,
wow.
Yeah, fair fucking point.
Yeah, Miss Gray is no longer us anymore.
Yes. So thank God, though, Mr. and Mrs. Gray were allowed to leave on the promise that they don't tell. And they said, we won't, we promise. And they walked right into the police station.
Of course.
So, of course. So the police ended up figuring out where to look for Mary Doherty's body at the college, but they had a problem because Burke and Hare were so careful to smother their victims in a time, obviously before advanced forensic science, that medical examiners couldn't confirm that a murder had actually occurred. So they didn't have the hard-hitting evidence they needed. So for all they could prove, Mary might have died of natural causes. So they needed more evidence. They also suspected, of course, that Burke and Hare might have killed other people, but there were no bodies to prove this. So on December 1st, prosecutors offered Hare immunity if he gave them the facts about Mary Doherty's murder. So Hare took the deal. He also secured his wife Maggie's freedom because it was illegal to make spouses testify against one another, as is still the case in most places. And then Burke and Hare's biggest mistakes came back for them. Because, who do you remember from earlier? Big Brain Janet.
Big Brain Janet.
Big Brain Janet heard the news about the men's arrest. And she's like, I fucking knew it. I fucking knew it. And she contacted police about her friend Mary Patterson. Likewise, a shopkeeper told police he had seen Burke's nephew wearing pants that had surely belonged to James Wilson. And he said, if Burke's family members are wearing this missing man's clothes, it doesn't seem good.
Yeah.
So when the public found out about James and Mary, there was a major outcry. People were outraged that anyone would harm James, a kind boy with a disability who was loved by the town. There were even ballads and pamphlets circulated about him. That's how well loved he was. Wow. And as for Mary, she was a beautiful girl, as we know. a local beauty.
Mm-hmm.
She was well known, and people really, really knew and liked her. And people were especially moved by the story, I think, as we were, of Janet's narrow escape, and then her
Yeah.
like hunt for her missing friend. And so, if this story just like blew up because obviously it's such a human interest story. So Burke and Hare had thought they targeted people who would disappear quietly, but in the end, a sex worker named Mary and a young boy with a disability named James, they were just beloved by the town. And so, that backfired. Their attempt backfired. And the trial then began December 24th, 1828. And here's a fun fact for you, just like off the wall fun fact. Queen Victoria did not take the throne for another 9 years in 1837. And her husband, Prince Albert, would eventually introduce the Christmas tree from Germany and make December 24th Christmas Eve like a whole thing.
Wow.
But until then, December 24th wasn't really a day, like a holiday where they would avoid a murder trial. It was just like another day, another work day. So just a fun fact for you, it would be another, couple decades before Christmas Eve was created as a real holiday. Yeah. So Burke was being charged with James, Mary Patterson's, and Mary Doherty's murders, and his wife Helen was being charged just with Mary Doherty, which was the one they hid under the straw.
Got it.
In the end, based on Hare's testimony, numerous witnesses, and Burke's own confessions on the stand, the jury found Burke guilty only of Mary Doherty's murder, and they found Helen's involvement not proven. So Burke held Helen's hand and said, "Nellie, you're out of the scrape." And Helen cried. So the judge sentenced Burke to hang, even though he was only convicted of the one murder. And get this, he was not only sentenced to hang, he was sentenced to be dissected after death.
That's that's a very weird thing for me to be intrigued by.
Isn't that something? So he actually,
I think it's poetic.
It is poetic.
It's a weird poetic justice. I obviously not pro death penalty, but it's a very
no. You're
100% way
100%.
that they.
Yeah,
I'm torn. It's like a weird gray space, but I'm like, that's a
sort of like
way to do it.
It's like, what a fitting punishment, like to have to become what you would create. Like be killed in the same way or be treated in the same way as all your victims. Again, I agree. I do not endorse the death penalty. But it is, you're right. Like there is some sort of poetic justice here in a way.
Yeah.
And the judge actually said, quote, "If it is ever customary to preserve skeletons, yours will be preserved in order that posterity may keep in remembrance of your atrocious crimes."
Wow.
So it's sort of like you will be put on display so that
as a monster.
as of like a reminder of what people like you did. So before his execution, Burke hit a religious streak, which seems to happen sometimes on death row, and he felt the need to come clean. He published an official confession. He listed all 16 victims, so that's how we really know all the details. And
this is the first time you're ever getting the information from the source of the murderer.
And it's like real information, because sometimes the source is like, "Oh, I murdered 80,000 people," and you're like, "Okay, stop." But I'm thinking Henry Lee Luke is here. But he listed all 16 victims, and this is kind of a dick move. He implicated William Hare in all of them.
Jeez.
So he still insisted that neither of their wives knew anything, which was
honorable.
Not true. But he also was like, but my buddy did it too.
Right.
he was there too.
But this fucking guy,
So the public rioted against Hare, angry he had gotten off free, and Helen had to disguise as a man and be escorted out of town by police to avoid angry mobs. So she was chased out of several towns before she eventually vanished from historical records. So we don't actually know what happened to her, but I like to think she probably just made a new name and laid low. I don't know what else could have happened. So People vandalized the anatomy school just in anger. They gathered outside of Dr. Knox's personal house, demanding he make a statement, but he stayed silent. William Burke, for what it's worth, was executed on January 28th, 1829, roughly a year after his murderous spree began. So in this 1 year, he started off as presumably never having killed anyone, and a year later, he is executed for killing 16 people.
Wow.
Like, what a fucking roller coaster of a year he had.
Yeah, a doozy.
A doozy. At his execution, 25,000 people gathered in the crowd. And when Hare left town, because he had gotten off scot-free, a mob of 800 people gathered to kill him. And it took 100 police to clear the crowd. He was able to cross the border to England and disappeared from history, except for some rumors and one claim that he returned to Ireland with his wife.
Wow.
So we don't really know. Dr. Knox, for what it's worth, became a scapegoat for his peers who were happy to let him take all the blame and shame for this whole body snatching situation. We're not saying he was a good guy, but also this was a rampant thing happening in every school pretty much that was going through this issue of needing bodies. This wasn't like, he wasn't like the solo, madman who was participating in this, if that makes sense. Obviously it wasn't good, but it was like a widespread thing he was participating in. In fact, bodies were so available in France that body snatchers couldn't even make good money selling them to doctors because it was an oversupply. But since Knox had been like so central to this case, he became sort of like the symbol of the entire body snatching movement.
That makes sense.
It does. Yeah, like symbolically, he was like at the heart of it. So angry mobs gathered at his home outside his classes every day to the point that he eventually had to quit. What else could you do, And he lived basically in total disgrace for decades until he finally opened a small practice in an area where no one knew his name and in a time when you couldn't Google someone and immediately pull up all the articles about it.
I was gonna say, what a weirdly lovely blessing if he really just wanted to. Assuming you're a good person and just want to get out of town and start over. Yeah. I like to think of movies like Catch Me If You Can. It's like, can you imagine if it were set back then? Like, how would you ever be caught? You'd never be caught.
You would just be. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what it is. Like the environment allowed him to move somewhere and start over, which I think is a lot harder nowadays. So in 1832, the Anatomy Act was passed, and this allowed bodies to be legally donated to licensed surgeons for science unless the deceased said otherwise prior to death. So this cut the demand for cadavers, making it a less prosperous and therefore less tempting business for resurrection men like Burke and Hare and anyone else who might follow in their footsteps. Get this, William Burke's skeleton is still on display at the Anatomical Museum in Edinburgh University. Just like that judge said, you will be put... And I love how when the judge said it, he's like, if this is ever a thing where we display skeletons, yours is first to be put up. And like, it is. This is what happened.
So trippy. It's also really wild to know that skeleton, when it was alive, heard that it would be on display.
That's trippy too.
Yeah, that's because every time you see a skeleton, you're like, oh, they had no idea one day we'd find them and that
underground and put them up.
Well, like that skeleton heard you're going to be on display.
He knew it.
So it's almost like there's a little life in the skeleton. Like if I were looking at that skeleton, I'd be like, you're here.
I'd be creeped out. I'd be like, yeah, part of you knew. Ooh, it's really unsettling. So William Burke's skeleton, still on display today at the Anatomical Museum at Edinburgh University. A notebook was made from his skin.
Of course, by Ed Kemper or whatever. What was that guy's name?
No, Ed Gein.
Ed Gein.
And by the way, you mentioned an Edmund earlier who was super unhinged, so I feel like we're on a weird Ed kick today.
Ed kick, yeah.
But yes, this apparently was not an uncommon practice at the time, which I remember learning in Boston on one of those history tours where they said, like, yeah, at this place you can find books made of human skin. It was normal back then. And I was like, okay, I don't know.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. I don't want to look at it. But so a notebook was made from his skin, which was, I guess, not uncommon at the time. And that is also on display at Surgeons Hall Museum. So that is the story. I'm sorry, it's so freaking long. I was just really into this one. I think I was just,
no, well done, well
Going at
told.
it.
It's a good. I think this was a pretty solid episode.
I do too, and I feel like we kind of had a little bit of like crossover just with the Scotland thing, being kind of just historical stories.
Our minds melding.
Mind melds.
It's very platonically romantic.
It is in a way.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Also, the stories were just both very good.
Woof.
I always love when I can get to tell a story that doesn't talk about death, and yours talked a lot about death, but there was at least that distance, that history distance we've talked about.
Yeah, it's like a human reaction to feel just less impacted by older stories. It's like time just makes them feel less personal and close.
I hope wherever Janet's soul is, I hope she knows that we're still giving her snaps for following her gut.
Absolutely. And Mary, obviously, all the victims, it's like, God, what a fucking traumatic and terrible way to go. Getting like lured in and only because they wanted to sell your body for money. It's like, ugh, the whole thing is sick. And putting her on display at the school, it's just all so sick. But let's all try to be Janet and really like trust our gut, but then also be like,
use your big fat brain.
Where the fuck is my friend?
Yeah. You know, use your big fat brain and follow your big fat gut. You know, just whatever you need to do, you do it.
You do it.
You survive. You thrive.
You thrive. You got it.
What was I gonna say to you, Christine?
Lord knows.
I haven't said enough in 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I feel like, should we keep talking? I guess so.
Maybe not.
We have the after chat.
We have our after chat, so I guess I'll see you over there. But thank you everyone for listening. It was a really good episode. I did your story was particularly intriguing this time around. So, and it really was eerie. The fact that the skeleton knows knew at some point beforehand.
I hadn't thought of that, but that is trippy for sure.
Well, another stop for us to check out if we ever head over to Edinburgh. So.
Oh, we should. Wouldn't that be fun?
It'd be fun. We've talked about a lot of, and that's why we drink retreats. And one day we'll have one.
Yeah, and I want to do Europe shows so bad someday.
We were supposed to, and then COVID knocked everything out. So
I know.
One day we'll get back to it. So
we will.
And until then, and
that's
why
we
drink.